Hello, everybody. And yeah, welcome. I hope everything's working. Let me know if you can hear me. It looks like my audio is working, but I have had some trouble lately with OBS. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for jumping on in here and joining me, and also for helping me get to this. This has been an incredible ride. Definitely some questions about how I've gotten to here, so I'll be talking a bit about that, but I never ever expected my channel to get to this size, so I just want to say thank you to everybody for helping me get there. And yeah, I see a lot of congrats coming in the chat, so thank you guys so very much. Tons of people here. My audio is good. Great, that's awesome. So tons of people in the chat here. Thank you guys so very much for coming and joining me. This should be a lot of fun, I hope. I've never done an AMA, never done anything like this before. I will be spending a lot of time looking at the chat, answering your questions and all of that, so do keep them coming. The only thing I'll ask is don't spam the chat. If you heard the Windows chimes before, I was on YouTube's documentation trying to find some stuff on how to enable slow mode, and it's out of date and I can't figure it out. If anybody knows, let me know. But just don't spam the chat if you have a question. If I miss your question, maybe ask it again a little bit later. But if you just keep spamming the same question, hoping I'll see it, I'll just ignore it. And we also have some moderators, or a moderator, as well as myself, that can put people in timeouts and all of that good stuff. So yeah, thank you guys again for all being here. I don't know how long we're going to be here. I have some questions that people had submitted ahead of time that I'm going to go through. Plus there's a whole bunch of questions that I've seen coming through in the chat. So again, if you've already asked a question, I might have missed it along the way. I was looking through them quickly as I was getting set up and all of that, and some of them are similar to ones that I'll be answering that were just prepared ahead of time, but I did see some that are a little bit different. So if you ask something earlier on, when you see that I'm looking at the chat, would be a good time to post it again. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to focus primarily at the beginning on the ones that were already ready, since we have all of those and people that ask questions ahead of time. And then I'll go into the chat and answer other questions, because I'll probably answer a lot of the ones already. But remember, this is an AMA. It doesn't have to be coding related. I don't really plan on jumping in and doing tutorials or, looking at code in this. It's more general questions, so it could be about literally anything you want them to be, as long as they're appropriate. So yeah, let me... I just see Nicholas asking me really quickly, do I speak French? Mais oui, il faut parler français. My French is terrible, but where I live, I have to be able to speak French. So I do speak French. I can understand it really well. I can speak it decently. I can read it, and writing is a challenge. Easy, I'm your first live. Doctor, hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Doctor, I'm just going to ask that you don't spam the chat like that. I see it coming in a lot now. I can't pay attention to everything coming through on the chat. So if I miss your message, you will be, if you start, oh, I don't know where my glasses are. Someone mentioning my glasses. I have no idea where they are. I should have put them on because actually the chat text is kind of small, but I should be okay. I probably left them up in my bedroom. I'm glad you like my content, Dr. J. So actually, I'm gonna go. Okay, actually, that's a really good question. I'll answer that one, and then I'm gonna jump into the ones that I had prepared ahead of time. But Koi Vuong asked, "What is my actual job?" So as of, oh no, my phone's ringing. I can go to later. My actual job as of January-ish, just recently, is content creation. And I'll be talking a bit about that because I've had some questions related to that as well. And I am 37 years old. The gray hair is starting to come in a little bit, or a lot. All right. So yeah, here we go. I think this should work. The slideshow should be working. Of course, it's not. Image slideshow off and on. Is that going to help? Come on. There we go. It worked. I didn't know I had that one. Okay, well, a lot of people have been saying that. We can go to the next one, but thank you, Danish, and everybody else who has said congratulations. Robert, a week ago, asked how to get customers for web design to earn some money. So this is something I have done freelance work throughout for years, actually, but it's always been a side gig. It's been something I've been doing on the side. So it's never been my primary source of income, which really takes a lot of pressure off. But I recently did a really good interview with Niall. It's on my YouTube channel right now, and you can watch that. And there's 2 other interviews I've done with freelancers that are over on Twitch right now that I'll be doing minor edits on and bringing to YouTube as well. So if you are looking at that, I would definitely suggest checking them out. I just did an interview yesterday with Kyle Prinsloo. It was a fantastic, super, super good interview. So if you are interested in freelancing, that's why I've started these interviews, is to help you guys out. Because I think people that are doing it full time will have a lot better information than what I could provide. Next up, we have the journey of my life. How did I get to this point? So hopefully this answers a lot of questions that I see coming into the chat from everybody who is here. And the journey of my life, how did I get to this point? So it's been a really strange journey, I won't lie. I've been, I originally started, I finished high school. And then I was originally going into the sciences. I was always good at math, science, and all of that. So I started going in that direction in college. Our school system here where I live is actually kind of weird. We finish high school, then we have a 2 or 3 year program, like college level thing, depending on what you want to go in. If it's something it's more work related, it's a 3-year program, or if it's a lead up to university, it's a 2-year program. So mine was a 2-year science program. I only did 1 semester, and then I switched into film. I studied film, got my degree in film, didn't know what to do, wasn't going to do that, even though I really enjoyed it. Went to university then and got a BA in urban planning, of all things. Didn't do anything with urban planning, was working some pretty menial jobs, and then went back to school to study graphic design at a vocational school. So that was like an 18-month program, and then I started work as a designer. From that, I was working as a designer and doing some freelance on the side. A lot of the freelance work I was doing was web design stuff. So I was doing the UI design, and then I'd been playing with a lot of HTML and stuff and CSS and building websites just as a hobby. So I said, well, I have enough experience to actually charge to make that. So I started adding that to what I was doing for my clients. A lot of WordPress work actually at that point. And then I got hired as a teacher at the graphic design school I went to, and I started teaching a lot of web development. And then I started a YouTube channel, and here we are now. So that's the fast forwarded version of everything. There are some questions coming up that are more specific to what I've done along the way as well. So I'll be jumping on those as well. Before I do that though, let's just see what's happening in the chat. I guarantee you I've missed a ton of questions. I do apologize. But let me just see what's happening here. A lot of people. The chat is flying by. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna go all the way to the top because there was a couple questions that came in early on. Actually, Nikhil asked before we got started about freelancing. So I do think actually for freelancing site to starters, I would definitely check out the interview on Twitch I did yesterday with Kyle. He talks a lot about that. And actually talking a little bit about my journey of my life, Jack asked, how did I create my first web project ever for personal and professional? So I don't know the first site I ever made. It was in high school, late 90s, mid to late 90s. I graduated high school in 2001. I graduated in 2001. So it was probably 99. So late 90s, Sec 3, that makes sense. And it was, take Photoshop, slice it up, get a table-based layout, do some stuff with that. I don't know what my first ones were. I was just doing it for fun, and I had one that was for a Star Wars RPG that I was part of that I did. I might have had something else. I don't remember exactly. I remember a few of the designs like in my head. It probably looks nothing like what they actually did look like. My first professional one, that's a really good question. I did a few for small. I'm just trying to think. The first one I did that was like, I'm doing this as, like a lot of the ones early on where I designed it and then I upsold to try and offer the website stuff as well. So it was sort of two pieces that got put together. It was a lot of like small company websites. There was nothing too exciting. I just remember the logo. I don't even remember the name of the company. That would have been the first one. It had like this double face thing in it. It was almost like a Facebook icon, but with two heads. They only used the design for like 3 months, and then I went back to check on it, and they'd completely had something different. I was really disappointed. I remember that. That sucked. And I was really proud of that. Again, I might not be remembering this right. This is a long time ago, but I remember it looking really good. But yeah, I did lots of things for like small businesses. I did a coffee shop thing, it was like a coffee shop / relaxation area. I don't know. Those were the early stuff I did. Varun asked what my real name is. It's Kevin. Not lying to you guys. So Ashish asked, oh yeah, I remember reading this one. So it's about asking, if testing CSS directly in the browser, looking at how to debug it. So I said, I'm not going to open up the browser right now, but I would really recommend using Firefox if you are writing CSS and you're trying to debug CSS. It has a lot of extra tools that aren't available in the other browsers for CSS specifically. So I did a video on this on like Chrome I said, if you're doing CSS, use Firefox, and a lot of people got angry at me. I wasn't saying that you should only use Firefox. I was saying when you're developing CSS, Firefox has better dev tools. Chrome's catching up. They have the grid inspector now, but Firefox has had that for a long time. Plus, they also have a Flexbox inspector, and they have other debugging tools that don't exist in Chrome. So I'd really recommend checking that out. I think I have a video that looks at it. Thank you very much, Shantam. When did you start? Oh, Dr. J, look at that. You got one in the comments here that I snipped ahead. So when did I start learning web dev? So I went through my quick story just to focus a little bit more on that. For me, and I get a lot of questions about how I got, how long it took me to get here, or how long, and we're going to get into that as well, because a lot of people want to know how long they have to spend or how to get better at CSS, JavaScript, whatever it is. For me, this is a really hard question though, because as I said, I started in high school just making websites as a hobby. And then I stopped for a while, and then I need another website for something just for fun, and I'd put it together and then have fun with it. And then, so it was like this really slow learning progression. I only really took it seriously when I went back to school for design, because that sort of, I was doing a lot of design stuff, and that sort of reinvigorated like, oh, I'd like to make a website for this. We had a small short web design or web thing that we did, like a few modules on building websites. So that really brought everything back. And at the same time, that was around CSS3 becoming a thing. So like all of a sudden, all of these new doors were unlocked, and it was so much better than what it had been with the table-based layouts and everything. We were still using floats for layout, but floats versus tables, like it was amazing. So then that would have been 2000. I'm gonna mess. I don't remember the years. I should have prepared ahead a little bit more, but this is like mid 2000s. Or yeah. Or like 2007-ish maybe. Or when did CSS3 come out? Right, it was right around there where I sort of dove back into it, and I was still not building client websites at that point, but I was getting a lot more into it, and I was trying to build actual stuff with it. I was starting to get into WordPress and seeing and how that sort of stuff works, and all of that. But it's been a really long and slow journey for me to learn web development. It hasn't been like, oh, I'm sitting down and focusing on it and just doing it. So hope that clears things up a little bit. Ami is asking, website generation tools are getting better and better and used more widely nowadays. Where do you see CSS development and design in the next 5 years? I like this question a lot because it's not, saying that we're all going to lose our jobs, which a lot of people seem to be worried about. I do think that since I started in high school, though, the what you see is what you get, the WYSIWYG editors have been around. So since the late 90s, people have been trying to make things where you could build a website without code. The no code thing isn't new. It seems to be growing, which is good. The tools are definitely becoming more mature, but like the only ones that I really think are any good are things like Webflow. But the reason Webflow is good is because you're writing HTML and CSS visually. You're not taking shortcuts. You need to sort of understand the basics of all of that. You're doing class names, you're putting in the HTML stuff yourself, you're putting in all your CSS yourself, you're just using a visual editor to do it instead of writing it. So I think we're a really long way off before we have to worry too much about that. I think a lot of the things like Wix, Weebly, even Squarespace, those types of things, like they're sort of filling in like a smaller niche that I think WordPress, like part of the WordPress thing where people find WordPress too complicated or it's not for them or for whatever other reason they want to use one of these other ones. And I think it's not necessarily they're growing, but it's also growing because everybody has a website now. Whereas if you went back before, nobody did. Big companies did. And then it's democratized making websites. It's made it so everybody has access to the tools to have one, but it doesn't mean that they're all equal in what they can do and how powerful they are and the performance of the website and all of that. And I do think that it brings people into having one. If a company is doing well, it often will outgrow things like Wix or Weebly or things like that very quickly. If they're growing, it might be perfect. Maybe that's all they need. And if that's the case, that's great. But I think a lot of the time, they'll outgrow that, and then they end up needing a developer or what have you along the way, or hiring a company. And I also think that all the languages and all the technologies, CSS, JavaScript, are growing really fast and changing really fast. More and more is becoming available. And so it becomes this thing where we, the phone went off. It really confused me there. Sorry, it threw me off. It's my mom's calling, but I'm not going to answer now. So it goes through my do not disturb. But yeah, I think that we're not all of a sudden going to be out of jobs, and this industry is not going to vanish. And you do need developers who make these tools as well. So that is something else to consider. But I do think it democratizes websites. I think it brings more people in. It's not necessarily replacing. Or it's replacing the bottom end, which is fine because those are the people that don't have big budgets anyway. It doesn't matter as much. So I think that once you start getting to the medium to larger size things, and there are some bigger things that are built on these tools as well. But yeah, I don't think it's something to worry about. I just think that it might grow, but again, it's the bottom area, and then it's usually growth from there. That's my guess, and I think it's going to stay like that for a long time. I think there's a lot of other industries and a lot of other jobs that have to worry about more automation and things like that than we do. Just my opinion, though. I got a lot of questions, and I get asked this a lot. So Fate was asking, can I make JavaScript tutorials for beginners? It is so confusing. And I get asked lots about JavaScript content and making JavaScript content. So I appreciate that you guys like how I teach. I think there's other questions coming up on JavaScript here that I have as well. I just want to say that for now, no plans on it. There's a lot of really good JavaScript developers that are making amazing content out there. So there's WebDev Simplified, there's Brad Traversy. I'm pretty sure DevEd has content on that. There's CodeStacker. There's so many other people. I'm going to be leaving a bunch out that I feel bad for, but just off the top of my head. And like, if you have these people making this amazing content, like I think they're great teachers, and I'm going to let them do their thing. And it's also not I'm not as strong with JavaScript as I am with CSS. So I'd rather focus on what I know really well and let other people focus on what they know really well. And I think overall that leads to, that's why I'm not making any JavaScript content for now. Oops, I closed the wrong one. That said, while I'm not focusing on that, if I'm creating something in one of my tutorials that does need JavaScript, I will do it, and I will explain why I'm doing it. I do have my intersection observer tutorial series. I have a few others too where I do use JavaScript, but it's usually to add the functionality I need for whatever it is. So I'm not going to specifically look at JavaScript, but I will include it when I need it. Let's go back to the chat for a little bit, and I apologize because I haven't been paying attention to it at all. So I see Rick, I will be taking more questions near the end. I'm going to jump in every now and then to grab questions from the chat, but I'm going to try and go through all the ones I had prepared ahead of time because it'll probably answer a lot of the ones that you guys have. So Mohammed, I see that web development is dying. Actually, another comment on that like web development is not dying because people don't need to write code. We're democratizing the process. We're making things easier. That's only a good thing. Maybe if your job is at stake because of that, it can be worrisome for you. But I think the more tools we can open up to more people and the less barriers there are of entry, the better. And I also see like if you have one of these no-code tools that you can also introduce, like Webflow might be a really nice introduction. Someone's making a website with that, then they want to push further and they start learning more about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and it can also help people get into the field as well. So I don't see it at all as programming dying. I'm not worried at all about that right now. Daniel K, what is the worst day of my life? Wow, that's a tough question. I'm not sure if there was ever a worst. I think we all have ups and downs. I think the hardest day of my life was when my oldest son was born, just because he was born 3 months premature. So it was like, my wife started bleeding. She's only 6 months pregnant. So that was scary. Go to the hospital. She's in the bed at the hospital. Actually, did they send us home the first time? No, she was having pain, so we went to the hospital, went home, and then the next day we had to go back because she started bleeding in the middle of the night. And then he was in the hospital for 3 months. But that first day, the whole time the first month, I guess he was in the hospital, like it was very touch and go. We didn't know if he'd make it. So that month was super stressful, maybe 2 months. But that first day or 2 days or whatever it was, obviously not happy times then. But he's great now. He's fantastic. He's healthy. So modern medicine definitely for the win on that one. And it was a stressful time for sure. Most recent major stress would have been that. Let's see if I can see anything else. Stop dying. How important is semantic HTML and CSS? I'm seeing a lot of divs in practice. So semantic HTML is very important. This is something like a lot of divs in practice comes from the old days too. So look at how old the website is. It used to be all we had. It also comes from people not being sure of what to choose. So it is a good thing. If you don't know, you're better off choosing a div than the wrong semantic element. But I do think it's really important. It's important for assistive technologies. It's important for SEO. It's important, Google to know what's going on in your page. It's something that I think a lot of people feel like they're choosing the wrong tool sometimes, so that they just don't, like, it's safe. They go, I'm not going to touch it because it's easier. But I do think, like, you're learning these complex languages of, JavaScript and to a certain extent CSS, and then you don't want to take the time to figure out which tag is, or which element is the right one to pick. For the most part, and on the first, I think there's different levels of semantics you can get into with HTML, but as like a global thing of using a header, an article, a main, a section, a footer, the nav, like the big easy wins, I think there's no excuse not to do them. I see someone just super chatted, and I don't know how to know who. Oh, there it is. T20S Grunt, thank you very much for the super chat. Super kind of you. I appreciate that very, very much. Troy Mitchell, how do you know which WordPress plugin you can trust for security reasons? With Wix, Squarespace, isn't security better? Yeah, I mean, it is, I guess, a bit of an issue with WordPress. I would say one of the things with plugins is see when they were last updated. If the plugin hasn't been updated in 6 years, I probably wouldn't touch it. I haven't done any WordPress development in probably 6 years, so maybe a bit less than that, maybe 4 years or 5 years. So just do take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because things might have changed. You sort of got to trust a little bit. WordPress security is a bit of a tough thing. I think overall, just, I think one of the reasons it's also a bit of an issue with WordPress is it's just so big that it makes an easy target. But, just looking at, I wouldn't necessarily get something that has, look who's created it, look if they have other things that are going on, and is it actively maintained. If other people are more WordPress developers here, I would, they might have better advice on that. Alessandri's asking if I'm going to make content about CSS Houdini. Eventually, maybe. We could dive into that a little bit. I don't have anything on the table. I have all my content right now planned to roughly the end of April. So maybe after that we could dive in. Hamza, thank you very much. I'm glad that I've taught you a lot. Zach saying the visual web tools automate the bad clients that can't or won't pay you. They're great. Yeah, I mean, it does definitely take that away. Or not take it away, but... sorry, Grunt, I didn't notice that you'd posted a question after, so I should have prioritized yours. I'll look at that now. Do you think the design software is dictating designs nowadays? It's a bonus for efficient work, but I feel like it's killing bespoke design, e.g. why so many designs are looking exactly the same. I think one of the reasons that designs look the same is people get inspired by other designs. You see things that work. I also do think that there is some limitation on what we can do that is changing. So like as CSS is evolving, we are getting more options and more tools and more things we can work with. We have Shape Outside now, Masonry's on the way. I think Shape Outside could really help. A lot of the design, if you go back and look at older things, there's a lot of things that are dictated on that as well, right? If you look at old designs from print, that's where I studied first. Like every now and then you get some crazy wacky design, but a lot of the time print designs all look the same too, or there'd be very similar things going on. There was a little bit more creativity, but you also can control the content a little bit more. So I do think that the lack of control we have in terms of the viewer experience does limit things a little bit. I also think that, I think that's actually a big part of it, because you need something that's going to be 3 columns, that then becomes 2 columns or 1 column. You need things to move around. It really depends on the screen size. So it can be hard to be more creative with designs and have them be adaptive and responsive. So that might be part of it. And part of it's also people, especially if it's like sales pages or anything like a company website, you want familiar patterns that people are already used to. So if you're trying to do something really creative, every now and then someone does something really weird with like a nav, and I end up on their site and it's this beautiful site, and like, it's something like awards is pointing to it, and then it takes me like 30 seconds to figure out how their navigation's working. If the user experience is too new or too different and the user has trouble, they leave the page. So that also has a part to it. I think that I don't think it's the design software. Part of it is the way CSS and the boxes and everything that is built in boxes of boxes of boxes. I think that's part of it. And I do think that a familiar user experience is part of it, and people just continuing to do what they know is part of it. And then just people relying on the same tools as well. So like Bootstrap for so long. I think more and more websites are going to start having a very Tailwindy look to them in the coming years. So like that type of thing also makes things all look the same. And just because that's what we've had before, people look at those designs when they're being inspired for new things. I think it's a combination of everything. Another super chat came in. A very big thank you to Simon Jesse. And I figured out how I've never really knew how super chat worked before. So thank you very much though, Simon. It's very, very generous of you. And he's asking, have you found web development to be less fun with the need to spend more and more time hardening sites against attacks? Security is definitely not my area of expertise. If I was working lately, the last projects that I have been working on have been, I've been part of a team. So, I'm being brought in as somebody who's focused on a very specific thing. And so for stuff like that, like I wouldn't be worried too much about the security, especially when your focus is CSS. It's less of a concern. So yeah, and if I was working on a big project in a freelance way now, I wouldn't be doing that side of things myself. I'd be hiring someone who's an expert to bring in to work on that. So I do think it's annoying that we have such big focus on that and that websites can be taken down. And it's always, when you go to somewhere and it's like you have you have to wait 5 seconds to get on the site just as they're verifying things to make, because there might be a DDoS attack or something. Like that's so frustrating, and that definitely sucks. There's a few things with the industry in that regard that does suck. And I can see how that, if that's something you're focusing on, that definitely like that's not the fun part and not the reason you got into it. So I could definitely understand that. And Rex Manners, another super chat. Thank you very much. It doesn't look like you asked a question, Rex. So if you did ask one earlier, bring it back. I'm going to jump back to the prepared questions I had, and then I'll jump back into the chat after that to see what's happening. And just before I do that, Marco just saying that the responsive web design has forced the imagination of graphic design. It does limit things a little bit in that we have to pay a lot of attention. It's hard when you can't control the design in terms of like that side of things. There's a really, really good YouTube video by Miriam Susan called "Why is CSS So Weird?" that really talks well about this topic. And talks about the control that we don't have and the control that the user does have. So again, it's called "Why is CSS So Weird?" By Miriam Susan. I definitely, if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend you check it out. It doesn't specifically talk about design, but it talks about why CSS is the way it is in regards to the user's control on things. And I think that user's control does have an input on design as well. Kay asked me what color my front door is. And I actually have to think about this for a bit. I'm pretty sure it's green, but it might be blue. It's really dark either way. I live in like townhouses, and so every door it alternates between green and blue. I think mine's green. Kind of embarrassing, I don't know. Nazi asked, am I married? Any grandkids? Good luck with your life. Thank you very much for saying good luck. I know I have gray hair, but I'm not that old yet. No grandkids. So I am married. I've been married for 11 years now, which is wild. And we were smart. We got married in 2010, so it makes it really easy to remember how long you've been married for, since it's on 2010, so you just go up from there. So we've been married for 11 years now, which is wild. Or it's coming up. We haven't hit our anniversary yet. And I do have 2 kids. So as I mentioned earlier, I have my oldest one was born early, but he's now 9 years old. And my youngest one is 6 years old. And we only have 2, and that is it. So we'll be sticking with 2 kids, and that's all. A lot of questions in this one. How much experience a beginner needs to get a job? It depends. I don't really feel qualified in a way to answer questions about getting hired, because I haven't been hired in a long time, and I've never heard, other than like just getting help on freelancing projects, so like bringing in somebody to do something on that. Like I've never hired or been involved in hiring really. So it's hard to say. It depends what you want to do. It depends what type of job you're after, what size of company you're after. So I think it depends a little bit. I do think that you do need to be somewhat comfortable with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript these days if you want a job at a company. But I can't say like what that level is, and it's not even about how much experience. It's about like what you're able to do, I guess, in a way. But I think it's never too early. Don't look, if someone says you need 3 years experience and you don't have 3 years experience, it doesn't mean you can't apply for a job. It's a pretty running joke. I know it's a running joke within web development, but I think it's a running joke in every industry. I've seen it in design too, where to be like, you need 5 years experience with this, and it's a technology that's only been out for 2 years. So like those things are just to weed people out. So don't be afraid to start applying for jobs early on. You learn more working than you will anywhere else. How comfortable are you with JavaScript and JavaScript code necessary to have a functioning responsive website? So this is where I'm comfortable enough to do stuff, but I'm not comfortable enough to teach it. Or if I am, I can figure out how to teach it. I'm always worried with JavaScript that I'm not doing things in the perfectly optimal way, because there's always ways to refactor and optimize your JavaScript better and more. And because it's always been something I've used, I'm comfortable using it. But when it comes to teaching it, I just have this hesitation because it's not like my primary one thing that I have so much focus on. But yeah, I mean, I can get stuff done, and I'm really good at searching the MDM and docs and all the docs and stuff to get things working if they're not working. What are some good volunteer open source projects? And this could be a really good thing if you're looking for experience and you don't have any experience and you're studying, or you're just finishing studies and you want to get more experience. You could do some contributions on open source projects. And what I would suggest is just do a Google search for good first PR or first good pull request. But just good first PR, you're going to get websites that list off things. There's some like open source projects that will actually have tags that are saying this is a good first PR. I don't remember what the tag is, but like go and look for good first PR, and you're going to find so much resources on finding good things to first start contributing to. So it'd be open source projects where you can it'd be usually the good first ones. They're simple things that are easy enough to tackle. And it's also, where it's really good experience doing stuff like that. So if you are looking for experience, that could be a good way to get started. And it can be a nice way to add something to your resume if you don't have any work experience, that you can at least have contributions to some open source projects. So it shows you've worked on something that is out in the wild, even if it wasn't a paying job. I'll take 2 more that I had prepared, and then we'll jump back to the chat. I was a bit curious about this. Is it safer to use CSS grid responsiveness instead of media queries? No. What's wrong? I don't know. I won't say no. Is it safer? I don't know what you mean by safer. So that's one of the things I'm not sure there. If you can do something with grid and it works without needing a media query, go for it. Awesome. If it's something that maybe grid isn't the right thing for, or you still need a media query because it's not working the way you need it to, then use a media query. If you're not sure and you know one way of doing it and you think maybe the other one will work, are you in a hurry and you need to get it working? Do the one that you know will work. If you have a little bit of time and you can experiment, then experiment and see if the other thing will work. But people have this like aversion to media queries. We have them for a reason, and they're not going to break your site or anything. Lazar, my first job. I just need some water and then we'll keep going. My first job would be working in a warehouse for my uncle, who's a ship chandler, when I was 12, 13, something like that. That was my summer job for years and years and years and years. So I worked a lot. I've worked in a lot of warehouses in my day. That was like just packing boxes pretty much. Eventually started doing driving work with them. So I've done that. I've worked at Costco's distribution warehouse that's close to me when I was in college. Yeah, I've done a lot of manual labor, so I'm happy I get to sit on my butt all day now. And I said we'd go back to the chat, so let's go jump back and see what's happening in the chat. And I just noticed that we're at 200 concurrent viewers. Thank you guys so very much for coming and joining. It's a lot of people. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for following and helping me get to this point. It's been a crazy ride. Similar to what we were just talking about prior, L. Pryor is asked about it would be great if to show a few example website designs we should be able to build before applying for our first jobs. What type of job are you applying to? Obviously, it makes a difference there. I would say like some of the things on Front End Mentor, like I think you should be able to do stuff like that. I think they're nice designs. They give you some places to start. I'm a big fan of what they do there, and I think that if you can do like their intermediate stuff, like you're doing all right. Galaxy, Samsung. Do I start CSS mobile first or desktop first, and how? Always mobile first. Always, always. I did a video on it. So if you look, I think it's called like, I don't remember. It was a clickbaity title on that one, but definitely mobile first. Like I set my typography first, my colors first, get all the backgrounds and stuff, and then I start worrying more about layout. And so I usually add complexity through media queries. So I start with the basic, just all the basics, getting all the content laid out, and then I'll move into layout. And then when I need more columns, maybe I'm doing it with grid with like an auto fit, but usually media queries, changing the flex direction or whatever. There are exceptions to this. Sometimes you have a max width media query for, say, a navigation, just because the navigation's more complex at small screen sizes than big screen sizes. But 98% of my media queries are going to be min width media queries where I'm adding complexity within the media query. But I do have quite a bit of content on that. If you look up Conquering Responsive Layouts, it's a free course where I look at that idea too. So you can check that out. Gustavo, can I make a video about 11T? I'm learning it right now and I'd love to see you using it. And then Brent mentioned just after that if you go on Twitch, I'm redoing my current website using 11T. So if you don't know what 11T is, for anybody else, it's a static site generator that's built on JavaScript, and I'm in love with it right now. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing with it. So if you do want to see me building that out, I still have some work to do. Not a lot. I'm almost done. But all the replays, everything are on Twitch right now. And I'll be live on Monday, probably doing the last of that work. But I do plan on getting some 11T content in actual like tutorial form here on YouTube in the not too distant future. I have a bit of a SaaS push that's going to be happening in the next month or two. And then after that, I'm planning on switching over to building out some projects with 11T and looking at some of the different cool things you can do with 11T. Because I'm a big fan of static site generators. I'm going to say your name wrong. I'll go with Henriksen asked how we style for zooming in on a browser. This is actually something that blows my mind when people say that like, oh, when you zoom in on a browser and then it goes to the mobile layout, that you don't want that to happen. I do want that to happen. I have someone who zooms in enough that like, if you have two columns and then the text is getting bigger and bigger, I don't want it to be this like giant two columns. I want, it's going to look better if it switches to the mobile layout. So I just rely on my media queries to take care of it for me. And they just if they zoom in enough that it's really zoomed in, they get a mobile experience. I make sure all my font sizes are in rems. I use ems and rems for most of my units in what I'm doing, which I guess can have an influence on things a little bit. Even though if you're zooming, the pixels change too. But I do that. The other thing there is Safari does media queries a little bit differently. So if you're using if you watch my videos, you see I use ems for my media queries, and that's why. Super chat from Walk. Thank you very much. Walk Alpajaro. Thank you very much on the congratulations. I appreciate it. Re-web animations. Do you prefer using CSS or JavaScript? I'm just starting out. So it depends on the complexity of the animation, and I'm not an expert in animations. So for me, when I start seeing the really cool stuff, it scares me. If it's simple transitions, little things moving around, hover effects, or when you're scrolling, things are loading in. Now for the scrolling, you do need JavaScript to detect where you are on the page, but the animation I'd be doing with CSS. For more complex stuff, that's where you start getting into things like GSAP or 3JS and all of that. And if you want somebody to check out, look up Jay. Brent, could you put a link to Jay's Twitch channel maybe? I think you follow him, right? Just because I could grab it, I guess, in a minute. But yeah, he does the craziest CSS and JavaScript animation stuff. Really impressive. And it's a bit out of the realm of what I'm comfortable doing. I'm more of a layout person. Mohammed's asking, can you be a web developer without a diploma or high school certificate? I don't see why not. It depends. I mean, it depends on how you want to do it, what type of company you want to get hired at, and a whole bunch of other things. That can make it a little bit harder, depending. Some companies like seeing a piece of paper. They want to see what you have. The interview I did with Kyle yesterday, he started freelancing. Now he has his own company. He dropped out of school. I don't know. I don't remember if it was before or after high school that he dropped out. But you know, you're starting your own company. When you're freelancing, people aren't usually asking for a certificate, so it could be part of it. Or it could also be something where over time, you know, if you have a really good portfolio and you're showing really good work, you should be able to get a job, in my opinion. For me, the piece of paper means less than other things, but I guess it depends on what you want to be doing too, right? If you're doing HTML, CSS, JavaScript, really front of the front end, it's one thing. If you're trying to get more into some of the back end stuff where I think more computer science knowledge can be a lot more beneficial, that might make it a little bit harder, but I think a lot of people have jobs there too that don't have computer science degrees. So, you know, I think it's possible 100%. No bugs. This video is not pre-edited. Not at all. I see a question. Anyway, I'm gonna jump into here because I think of some of the questions I see coming up I have in the prepared questions. My first job was the last one. Whoops. There we go. Am I out of questions? Oh, there we go. Where do I live? So what happened to the last one? Let me go back one here. I have a blank slide. That's so weird. So where do I live? I'm in Montreal, which is in Quebec, Canada, which is why I can sort of speak French. My French is really bad for somebody who lives here. But if anybody does live or know the area, the reason I'm not very good at French, I went to elementary school in French. High school was in English. All my circles have been English. Cégep was English. University was English. A lot of the jobs I worked at were English. I only had one job where I had to work like full-time in French. And when I stopped there, I started teaching, and teaching was all in English. So I know enough French to get by. But yeah, I'm in Quebec. Or Montreal. I'm just off the island of Montreal. Congrats. Thank you very much. Will you ever release a small free course like the responsive layout one, something that will focus on one aspect of CSS? I'm glad that you like the responsive layout one. So if you don't know about that, again, I just mentioned it before, but Conquering Responsive Layouts is a free course that I do have. If you Google search it, it should be right at the top. It will be, I don't have any plans for one right now, just because it took me a lot longer to put that one together than I thought it would. And I have a few other things in the works. Not saying that I'll never do it. I probably will. I just don't have anything planned at the moment on that, but it will be coming. Why learn vanilla CSS when there are other frameworks, when there are frameworks like Bootstrap? Because I think you could do a lot more with Bootstrap if you know CSS. And when I learned Bootstrap, I was decent with CSS. I wasn't great. I was decent. And I actually learned a lot from Bootstrap about writing CSS and different things with CSS. And I think the important thing, if you are using something like Bootstrap, is not just use Bootstrap, but read about it, read the documentation, understand how it works, and really like that's what sort of made me much more comfortable because I was able to do stuff. And this when I learned Bootstrap, it was when it was still float based. And so like you had to do some pretty interesting things to get everything working properly back in those days. And so like, yeah, I learned a lot from figuring out how they were doing what they were doing. But even now, like I think even with Tailwind is like the really popular one these days, and Bootstrap is still popular, and there's Foundation, and there's so many other ones. But if you know, and it's the same as React. If you could jump into React and Vue and Angular, And so many people jump there, but I would learn JavaScript instead of learning, Bootstrap might die one day or it might vanish, and then you have to learn another framework. And React might die one day, and then you have to learn another JavaScript framework. And people say, oh, this could never happen, but look at jQuery. jQuery, I learned jQuery before I learned JavaScript. And so like nobody ever thought jQuery was ever going to go anywhere. It's still widely popular, but it doesn't get the headlines anymore, obviously. But no one ever thought jQuery was going anywhere, and now it's pretty much, I think the focus has really shifted away from that into things like Vue and React. So those could easily enough fade away to something else. And if you learn the framework, then you're stuck with that framework. If you learn Bootstrap only, you're stuck with Bootstrap. If you learn CSS, I could pick up any framework pretty quickly because I know what they're doing and I understand how they're doing it. So it's not about learning their class names and getting something to work. It's about understanding why that's working. And I think that's like an infinitely more useful skill than knowing how to use a single framework, or even multiple frameworks. But if you're able to use like 5 different frameworks, you probably know how CSS works pretty well, or JavaScript or whatever it is. I'll do 2 more of these and we'll jump back to the chat. Is it possible to code on a mobile phone? So this is, there is, I don't remember which Discord server it was in. Somebody had mentioned that they'd actually started that way. And I think it's Adrian, I'm going to say his name wrong. Adrian Twarog. He's an Australian YouTuber, and he has a video that shows how you can get VS Code running on your phone. So like anything's possible. I could see it being difficult. It definitely raises the barrier a little bit and makes things a lot harder. But is it possible? I think so. I wouldn't want to do it personally, but if that's the only way you could get into it, and that's something you really want to do, like all the power to you. But the faster you could get access to even like a really affordable computer, I think would definitely be worth it. But to get started, I guess so. I don't think it'd be easy though. You did the hard work. I didn't remember even taking that screenshot. You did the hard work, prepare yourself for the harder. How do you build your eye for design? So this is something I think a lot of people, I like this question a lot because it's not saying, it's like, how do you build that eye for design? And I think what happens is a lot of people think you either have an eye for design or you don't. I think an eye for design comes from paying attention to design. The more you look at design, the more you pay attention to design, and the more you study design, the more you will understand and appreciate design and be able to take those ideas and use them. So if you just look at stuff and you don't pay attention to it, and then you try designing something and it doesn't look good, that's to be expected. Try and make a website without looking at code before, you can't do it. Try and design something without paying attention to design, you probably won't do it. So pay attention to design. If you see something that looks good, why does it look good? Another thing that's insanely useful is at the beginning, it's the same if you're an artist, the first thing they have you doing is not trying to do your own creations. You're going to copy what other people have done. So and it's why a lot of artists early in their careers, their style is very similar to another artist, and then they slowly develop their own style. And this is classical arts, like painting and all of that, drawing. So like if you're drawing, you're copying other people's drawings. If you're designing, you want to design a website and you want to learn how to design better, copy exactly how another site is done. Like don't even try and make it your own at the beginning. Copy it. It's not as exciting. It's not as fun. You're going to learn so much, so much. You start seeing all the little details. You start seeing the differences between your design, their design, and seeing why it's different. You start really picking up on the little things they're doing, and from the spacing to font sizes, font weights, all of these different things that play together, the contrast, the colors they're using, there's a lot that goes into it, and you start picking this up by copying a design. The next step is usually being inspired by designs to do your own, because the nice thing there is sometimes you'll see something, it looks great, you try and use that influence to do your own design, and it looks crappy. And then you have something to compare it to. Why is it working for them and not working for you? The context is different. The content might be different. Maybe your title is just way too long and everything else is perfect, but the title is really long. So then you go, that sucks, but that's what it is. But a lot of the time it's little things that are different. Your spacing is different. Your padding is different. Your color contrast is a little different, things like that. And you start seeing, okay, this worked for them because they did it this way. I'm going to do the same thing here. Oh, it's starting to work. And then you keep doing that over and over and over. you have to stop relying less on looking at other people's designs to be inspired from, because you're building up this knowledge in your own head. You're training yourself to see design and understand design. It takes time. It's not an overnight thing. Close that for a minute. We'll jump back into the chat. My chat is frozen. Oh, it's back. It's back. Good. I couldn't scroll down. Mr. Motion, I'm only at 200k subs. I think that's a lot of subs. I'm super happy to be at 200k. Manic, hi, how are you? Troy, is that why so many developers play guitar? That's a good question. I don't know. Stop dying. How much is my CPM? Not enough. Hope of Glory, nice seeing you here. Thank you for coming and joining in. Anuj, I'd already answered that. Definitely mobile first. Actually, okay, so I see a question there about Tailwind. I'll jump on that one. That's from, well, it's just Tailwind question mark, but I'm guessing it's from my opinion on, so Akhilesh Kumar, Tailwind. What do I think about it? I think that I want to be careful with how I answer this. I think that a lot of people don't use it the way it's intended to be used, or why it would be the biggest benefit. One of the advantages of having utility-based classes for everything is that the final CSS can be really small. So if you're going through and using it properly and then you're purging your CSS at the end, you can end up with a minuscule CSS file, help with your load times and all of that. And that's sort of why they took that approach. And then they did more, because obviously it's from the guys who have other stuff going on with it. Than just they have the UI side of things too, so they're helping with that as well. But I think that people are using it more for that. It's a little bit like Bootstrap, whereas people would start using Bootstrap because it has the grid system. And back when in the float-based days, that made sense. There's a reason it was hard to make grids with floats, especially responsive ones. So people would bring in this whole Bootstrap giant library just for their grid system, and that sort of defeats the purpose. And if you really want to use Bootstrap now, I think you should be using Sass. Actually, they might have changed it a little bit because of how imports work now, but I remember when Bootstrap 4 was coming out, like looking into it, and just like if you only imported what you needed, you could minify your files a lot. You could actually make the CSS file like a tenth or less of the size. So like there's advantages there. I'm not a fan of the over-the-top. Let me know if I'm getting an error from YouTube just saying that my bitrate's a bit low. So let me know if everything's okay on your end. But yeah, I'm not a fan of just writing everything as utility class. I sort of like writing my CSS as CSS. I am using more and more utility classes of my own that I used to not ever do. So I understand, and I for like quick, same as Bootstrap, like throwing something together really fast in Bootstrap can be satisfying. So like same with Tailwind. I think like for throwing something together quickly, it's great. It's amazing. And I also understand 100% why people love it that aren't super comfortable with CSS and don't want to write CSS. They want to, they're focused on the JavaScript, they're focused on functionality, getting their React project going and managing everything that has to do with that. They don't want the overhead of everything else. So I get it 100%. For me, I like writing CSS because I literally enjoy writing CSS. So I'm going to stick with writing my own CSS. Craig Miller, favorite pizza topping? Good question. I like just like a nice pepperoni with onion. I like onions a lot, so generally like onion, pepperoni. I started making my own bread during the pandemic. One of those like super pandemic things to do. I don't make my own bread very often anymore, even though I should. It's so easy to do. But we still make our own pizza crust now, so we're making a lot of our own. Excelum saying that HTML for Tailwind is gross. Yeah, I mean, I don't like what the HTML looks like at all. I like the idea that the CSS is in the CSS and the CSS isn't, it's almost like you can make everything an inline style. I know it's not that, I get it, but it's sort of how it feels sometimes. What else is happening? Which framework would you suggest to learn first from Panther King? For what? Why do you want to learn a framework? If you don't need to learn a framework, I wouldn't learn a framework. If you want to learn a framework to get hired at a job, see what's being. I mean, these days Tailwind is all the rage. Bootstrap is probably still a good thing to know how to use. But if it's just for yourself to learn, I mean, it could even be a good learning thing just to learn and see how they work. Again, I learned a lot by learning Bootstrap. But if you, whatever framework you decide to learn, or if you're talking more JavaScript frameworks, if you're learning React or you make sure Vue or whatever it is, like I don't know which one you should learn, but learn CSS if you're learning a CSS framework. Learn JavaScript if you're going to learn a JavaScript framework, and then learn the framework. And then also make sure you're understanding how the framework is working and not just how to do this one task with it. I think that's important, and you'll learn a lot more too. Founder Tur, I hate SCSS and less. Is this normal? I love SCSS. I don't use less. I mean, I can understand it when I look at it. I've never written it. I played with it a little bit years ago. But since I was using Sass, I never had to bother. I like them. I love them. But I mean, to each their own. You can do so much with just vanilla CSS these days. Bruno is asking, what would be a good CMS to use as a semi-beginner developer? Watched a video about Sanity. Do you have any? I don't have any experience with Sanity. I've heard good things about it. A professional tutorial. I have some stuff. I haven't done a navbar tutorial in so long just because I did like 5 of them ages ago and I'm sort of got tired of it. Anuj, I don't think that learning frameworks is bad if you want to be a front-end developer. I just think it's more important to learn the core languages first. And then if you're comfortable with them, then you can add frameworks to your repertoire. Gustavo is asking, is WordPress something we should keep using? Have you coded a WordPress theme? I have. I made one WordPress theme on my own, and then I was doing client work for a while with WordPress stuff, so I would just make child themes, though. I wouldn't make my own. It's so much easier to make a child theme than a full theme from scratch. And so you find something that's not bloated, that's very simple, it gives you the tools you need. At the time, it was years ago, as I said, I was using the Genesis framework, which was just a base theme that you could easily build off of. There's lots of hooks that were available, so it made it a lot easier if I needed to add functionality or to move things around a little bit. So that for that, it worked for me. I think it's still, like, if you want to become a WordPress developer, there is so much demand for that still. It's huge and it's growing, I think, still. So like, you're never going to go wrong learning it, but it's if you want to learn that, right? You have to get into PHP. I think Gutenberg's even with JavaScript now, isn't it? But there's, you do have to figure things out a little bit and decide if that's something you want to do. But it's a huge industry. Mustafa, how many hours do I work per day? It depends on the day. Most days, though, I'm just, if anybody doesn't know, I am content creation full-time now. So it is my kids. I drop my kids off at the bus. I'm back in the house by 8:45. So by 9, I'm usually on my computer. I work from, say, 9 to 3:45. I have to get my kids at 4. I have to leave the house at 4 to pick them up at the bus stop. So I work 9 to 4 with a lunch break, a couple, it depends on the day. Some days I do less work than others, but 9 to 4 is like a typical day for me. Pebble, my day's going really well, thank you. X Salams, do a review portfolio as a series on the channel. I am doing monthly reviews of people's projects now over on Twitch. So I'm accepting submissions through my Discord. So if you're not in my Discord community, you can jump in on there. The link to it should be in the description of this video, I think. So you can jump into the Discord. There's a role that you can add that will let you be notified when I'm going to be accepting submissions. And then I do a live stream on Twitch where I will be reviewing people's stuff. I see a couple more super chats. Thank you guys very much for your generosity. It's always super nice of you. Diago's asking, can you share a bit on how you stay up to date with CSS changes, people you follow, and all of that? Definitely. And just so I don't miss the other one because it was timing out. Oh, just thank you, Petro PZQI. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. Super generous of you. So yeah, the resources and all of that I use. CSS Tricks is a big one. I'm on their newsletter. So that's always good for just like getting little things, and just I have their RSS feed too on my newsreader thing. So that's always fantastic. It's one of my favorite ones. Smashing Magazine is another one. I am subscribed to Smashing Magazine, so there's like the conference talks and other things you get through that that you can look at and all of that. I do just try and keep up to date with browser when browsers release, seeing what new features are added and things like that as well. And Twitter is my other big thing. I just follow tons of people on Twitter, and so when new stuff gets added, usually I see tweets about it. Those are the main things that I do. If you want, I mean, my Twitter follower list is a big mix of all sorts of different things, but if you focus on the web development people I follow on there, because I think you can see who I'm following, it could be a good way to learn stuff about that. Now, Miak Patricia, are you a code god? No, definitely not. Ever since I did that CSS battle with Kyle, people have been calling me the king of CSS. I appreciate it, but you know, I'm good at what I do, but I'm definitely not the king of it. Yeah. Have I ever written a custom scroll bar, scroll container link, simple bar, perfect scroll bar? I've done custom scroll bars in the past. They're not that difficult. I should probably do a YouTube video on it. If you look in my... I did one for my the style stage site I did. Nothing too fancy though. Single page application versus multi-page application. It depends on what you need to do and why, and you know, there's so much thought process that should go into it. I don't want to give, like, I don't think that one is better than the other. I think it depends is a big part of it. And like, if you're trying to choose between one, like what's making you lean one way or the other way. And it could be the tech stack that you're using. It could be what you're familiar with, and so many other things. And it depends on like what's the purpose of it and what are you trying to do and what technology do you need, and you know, yeah. The king. All right, let me see. I have a few more here I'm going to look at that I got ahead of time, and then we'll stick back. Could you, a quick one here, could you do a dark mode with Dart Sass? Maybe. I mean, you could make a dark mode with CSS, so you could make a dark mode with Sass then. You mean like a mix-in or something? Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could definitely, that'd be something interesting to explore on that. Okay, so I did see a few questions about how much money I'm making from content creation, I guess, or from YouTube, and I knew this question was coming up, so I didn't answer it from the ones in the chat. But are you making more money off YouTube than you were as a front-end developer? I'm curious to know. So it is a little bit of a hard question to answer because my last job was teaching. So the last full-time job I had was teaching. From YouTube, no, not even close. YouTube is not a salary. YouTube is side income still. So most income for me right now will be courses, because YouTube is nice to get money from, but you need, especially, it depends on the niche that you're in. So different niches have the advertising rates are different, and so some pay, if you want to be rich as a YouTuber, make content that's about making money. So like stock market, or just like how to get rich, or like probably small business stuff, because advertisers are willing to pay a lot more against that content. They don't pay a lot for web development stuff. So things like CPM, like the average ad rates are very low in this niche compared to a lot of other ones. Self-improvement too is quite high, and stuff like that. So that makes a big difference. I also was only doing one video a week for a really long time. So the more content you have, the more views you're getting, the more money you can make. But for me, it's not even close to a salary. So just so you know, you don't get rich off of YouTube. I'd still recommend people start making content, whether it's a blog or YouTube videos or whatever else they're familiar with, to teach what they're learning, but don't do it for the money. Are you as proficient in JavaScript as CSS? I won't go long on this one because I sort of answered it in a no. I can get by in it, but I'm super comfortable with CSS, or a lot of things with CSS. Not everything, but most things with CSS I'm very comfortable in. JavaScript, I can get things to work. Okay, I had a lot of questions on this. Is it possible to learn web development and become job ready within a year full stack? And you hear what are the steps to take and all of that. And I had other people asking about how fast to learn, or how they're able to learn faster, or things like that. One of them is, I don't think there is such thing as like a path to give you, or a very like singular thing that I can just say, this is the right thing to do. I think there's a lot of, everybody's gonna have a different path. Everyone's gonna have a different way to get there. It depends what you wanna do, what technologies you're learning. Are you going to university? Are you going to be self-taught, or whether it's university or a program? The best advice I can give is just make sure you're learning with purpose. So don't learn something, don't watch a tutorial and that's it. And there's this false sense of knowledge that you get when you can understand what's happening in a tutorial. If you watch someone do something in a tutorial and you understand it, that does not mean that you know how to do it. It probably means you can't do it still. This is sort of like, I always use the analogy of riding a bike. If you've never ridden a bike in your life, you can watch someone ride a bike and understand exactly what they're doing, and then you can get on the bike and fall over and break your leg. So it's, watching someone do something and understanding how they're doing it. Even if you understand every single line of code they're writing, it doesn't mean you could write that same code. And that's also why sometimes you watch all these tutorials after tutorial after tutorial, and then you go to start writing your own thing and you're stuck. You have no idea where to start because you watched them, you understood it, but you don't know how to do it. Big difference there. So the biggest thing you can do to learn, and to learn quickly, is to watch a tutorial, follow the tutorial, then do it without the tutorial. And I don't know, if you can repeat it again without a tutorial, then you're reinforcing what you're learning. And then maybe take it and use it in other contexts and keep using that skill over and over again. Watching tutorials, you're not learning anything. You need to put things into practice to actually be learning. So how long it would take you to become a full stack or a front end or a back end developer, I can't tell you. Everybody's journey is different. Everyone learns at different paces. Everyone has different styles and approaches and free time and everything like that. So it's different. But on how to learn quicker, I think that's the best way to do it. Del Vidas, thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. When will we see some advanced CSS with tricky layouts? For example, sticky and relative content, background shapes, etc. Yeah, I don't have tons of content that are bigger projects because it takes a really long time to create it. Like really, really long time, especially I make my own designs 95% of the time, so it is longer to put together. So that's the main reason I don't. I really like looking at the different projects and the different things with the projects, or different pieces and like the different ways things work, and then let people implement them. But I do have plans for some bigger things along the way too. I mean, I do have some fun things with position sticky. I've done a couple of fun videos when I was exploring that. So you can always check that out. And I do want to, I think when I get into 11T and doing more 11T content, I'll probably so that might be a while, maybe a SaaS project too, where I build a page out. So we could look at some fun things in that. So it will be a while, and they will be spaced out a lot, just because they're really long to put together for me. Let's see what we had next here. So here's same idea, how to be a good front-end developer. It's just make sure that you're not watching things, you're not just reading tutorials, but you're actually taking what you're reading and what you're learning about and putting it into action and practicing it and using it. It's I think the benefit, and that's not just for being a front-end developer, it's for anything you do in your life. Is it time, should we start learning frameworks like Sass or Tailwind? So just know Sass is not a framework, it's a preprocessor. I know really early on in the chat, maybe it was before I started, someone actually asked the best preprocessor. I like Sass. Sass is the most popular. If you want to learn a preprocessor, it's sort of like why a lot of people go to React, I think, is because it's the most popular. So Sass is the most popular. It's probably the one to recommend it because of that. I really like it. There's other ones as well, though. So, but for Tailwind or other frameworks or libraries and all of that stuff, it depends on what you're doing. So it's a hard one to answer. And even Sass, like I wouldn't start with Sass, learn CSS, and then start adding Sass to the mix. Tim, you mentioned that you came from a print background. What training did you do, and what extent did that influence your design? So the training I did, it was a vocational school, like I mentioned earlier on. And it was a school that focused on print design, but mostly on page layout. So we did like Photoshop, Illustrator stuff. So I was already knew how to use Photoshop, but we got pretty good at Photoshop as well. But it was a lot of typography and a lot of just page layout. And I think that's a lot of the skills I learned there were very transferable to web design, because page layout on a magazine is very similar to page layout anywhere else, or the principles of design are very similar one to the other. There's obviously some differences, the biggest one being that the page changes what it looks like at different screen sizes on the web. But the core ideas of typography and the core ideas of page layout, I think, had a big influence, but I think they're very transferable skills from one to the other. Is that the end? I think that might be the end. It is the end. Okay, so I got through all the pre-prepared questions. What time is it? I'm wondering, my parents have called me 3 times since I started. I think there might be, I'm wondering if I should call them back. There's something, but I'll keep going for another we can go for a little bit longer. It's only been, how long have we been going? I don't know how long we've been going because YouTube is bugged out on me. I started at 10:30. Oh, it's only been an hour, just over an hour. Let's see what's happening in the chat. So if you do have any questions, I'm only looking at the chat now. No more prepared questions that were I grabbed ahead of time. So ask away, but don't spam. Brent will put you in timeout if you're spamming in the chat. So just don't spam in the chat. If I miss your question, hopefully I answered something. I also might skip some questions just if it's something I've already answered earlier in the stream. Keyboard events without JS. What type of events? Roman B has asked, any tips for animations? It's hard for me to stop and not overload with animations everywhere. Keep animations simple. Animations can be really useful to get a user to pay attention to something, but the more you have, the less value that animation has. If you're animating everything, it's sort of, and this I guess can go back to my print design days. We didn't have animations, but you need like hierarchy, and you need to tell the user where they should be looking. And so they're looking for visual clues that are going to help them. So if you're scrolling and something fades in, that's a visual clue that maybe I should look at that. They're seeing something move, it's going to attract their eye to it. If everything is moving around and being animated, that goes out the window. Everything has that same visual importance now because they're all moving and they all have an importance to them. So it really depends. If that's the case, then like be really careful with it. Whereas, if you're using it in a smart, subtle, and I think it depends what you're doing. And there's times with these like cool animations and stuff like that. But a lot of the time, more subtle animations are actually more impactful in a way. They're better for the user experience. And also just be really aware that some people, animation for them, like they're gone. So have the media query for prefers reduced motion to make sure that you're not putting in animations for users that don't like experiencing it. Even like simple things like background attachment fixed, people love it. They think it looks cool with that parallax thing. People who are really sensitive to motion sickness, that will give them motion sickness on a page. So you want to make sure that you have it set up through media queries. I have a video on it somewhere looking at it to disable animations for people who don't want them on. If you have it, it's sort of like the prefers dark mode. Prefers, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's just to make sure that if they set it up in their system not to have any animations, that your website won't have any animations. I see. Mudit, please don't be spamming in the chat. What I'm going to do, actually, I need to refill my water. I'm going to take it's going to say 10 minutes, but it's going to be like a 3-minute break or a 3 or 4 minute break, and then I'll be right back. So you guys can hang out in the chat a little bit. I'm going to actually pause the chat where I am now. So I'll take some questions that are coming in while I'm gone. And if you guys just want to chat with each other or whatever it is, and like 3-4 minutes, it'll say 10 minutes because my timer's set up that way, but 3 or 4 minutes and I'll be back. There, audio's on now too. Told you it wouldn't be too long. Got a nice full cup of water now too. Alrighty. So I have seen a lot of questions coming in about Tailwind in the chat. If you are wondering about it, just know that I've already spent a lot of time talking about it, so I probably won't mention it again. So if you did ask about it and I didn't answer your question, maybe if you watch the replay later or something, but the big message coming from it was just, I see why people like it. It's not for me. I'll stop there. I see it prefers reduced motion. That's the one I was thinking of. Thank you very much for that code, Nasher. My chat jumps around a little bit as I'm scrolling through, which is a bit annoying, but I think we're okay. See if anybody has any questions about anything whatsoever that I haven't talked about, by all means. And I know not everyone's been here this whole time. L. Pryor, your previous job was hit by COVID and now you're looking at getting into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Good luck in the transition. Definitely a hard time, I think, for a lot of people. So yeah, good luck with that. And I think it's a really fun avenue to go down. So the main record on VS Code is crashing on you a lot and getting error code OOM. Could you try reinstalling it? I'm not sure. That wasn't 4 minutes, it was less than 4 minutes, I think. Josh. Other than CSS, what are some hobbies that I have? Good question. Over the pandemic, I got a bit into card magic. I haven't been keeping up as much. I have no one to do it to because we're just constantly in lockdown. My kids got really tired of it. They sort of started coming up with their own card tricks, but yeah, that. I make my own beer. I haven't done it for a while, but I want to get back into it. That's what else? Those are the two main ones, I guess, that I've had recently. Hey Tam, please don't spam the chat. It's not going to get your question. It's not going to get your question answered if you're spamming in the chat. Balanced ragged lines in CSS. What do you mean by balanced ragged stop dying? I'm not too sure I get it. Because if it's balanced, then it... Oh, balanced ragged. I get what you mean. If there's... Sorry, I was thinking of sort of a combination of justified. But you just mean like making sure that... Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to do it, to be honest. Just because that would be a lot for the browser to try and like... Again, we have to think about like there's all the different screen sizes, like infinite screen sizes possible. So like the browser would have to be doing a lot of work. There might be a JavaScript library that can try and do something with that. But I think it would be a lot for the browser to try and figure out. I could be wrong though. Maybe there's something, but if there is, I don't know what it is. Sumit said, as we're moving forward with mobile technologies, PWAs are the future and how we consume apps on our phone. They even open up a market for new ecosystems. Agree, disagree, comments. I wish, I hope. PWAs seem to have hit a really big wall, a big part of it thanks to Apple. And I think I read somewhere that Firefox is not implementing something to do with them anymore, but I don't want to comment and say the wrong thing on that. But Apple has a very big incentive not to let companies have PWAs, because then they won't make purchases through the App Store. Like, there's one thing that's really important to know with Apple is if it's on the App Store, any purchase through that app also, like if you download an app on your phone, and it's the same with Google, but Google has a different like revenue stream that's not like their main thing. But if you have an app and then you make a purchase in that app, Apple's getting, or they're getting like 30 to 50% or whatever it is. And so they have no incentive to open up PWAs as a thing. So I know there's some, I don't know everything about them, to be honest, but I do know that there's issues around that, or that's one of the big issues. Do I have any Metal Guitar Covers is asking if I have experience in data visualization, SVG manipulations. No, I don't. I always love seeing really good data visualizations, but it's not something I've ever done. Robert, what do you think about including all style in JSX? View template markups for many components in NPM. The only way to style it is to set some parameters as attribute. Why don't people use custom property? Yeah, actually, I was just listening to a really good interview on I forget the guy's name, but it was on Shop Talk Show. It was about like an emoji picker thing and just how he used custom properties to enable customization of it. I thought it was really clever. It sounds really cool. Different people set them up in different ways, so it does limit a little bit. They might have reasons for doing it in their mind that maybe, or they're not considering so much the ability to make changes to it, which can be kind of annoying. Yeah. Bunsell, could you build a shoot 'em up game using Tinker only? Tinker? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what Tinker is. Tinker? Vaslav? Excuse me, I just drank some water. When you enter Google Chrome DevTools and then hit Control-Shift-M for the toggle device toolbar, then select the viewport size for a device from the list, for example, iPhone. You can see that the viewport shrinks to that size, but the iPhone... Okay, so actually this is a good question. It brings up the idea... so a pixel, a CSS pixel is not a pixel. So a view, like as you said there, the iPhone X has a viewport. It has a resolution of 2,436 pixels by 1,125. But if you do it in the DevTools, it's simulating it at 375 by 800. And they're doing that because they're simulating based on CSS pixels, not based on actual pixels, because there's pixel density that plays in as well, right? The pixel density of your computer screen is probably a lot lower than the iPhone X. And so 1 pixel on an iPhone is super tiny, and 1 pixel on like a 72 dpi monitor is pretty big comparatively anyway. And so 1 CSS pixel is not... It's a physical, like if you take a ruler, it's a physical form of measurement, and it's a little bit wishy-washy. So it's impossible to simulate something 100%, but it's based on the approximate viewing distance from the device that 1 pixel is supposed to measure like an actual unit of measurement. So that's why when you're whenever you simulate something, if you're doing a media query, for example, your media query that's going to change the viewport, like change it from columns to stacking on top of each other at 600 pixels wide, it still kicks in on that iPhone X, even though the width of the actual pixels, it's over 1,000 pixels wide, because it's not looking at how many pixels it is, it's looking at how many CSS pixels it is, and there's a big difference there. Facundo, nice to see you in here. How are you doing? I'm glad to see you in here. Thank you very much. Have I considered speaking at conferences? I'm a great communicator. The stage will fit you well. Thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment. I am going to be doing my first conference this year, so that should be interesting. I won't point anyone to it yet because I think the website's getting a bit of an update. The date of it just got pushed back, but it's the Modern Web Summit. And I think the name's getting changed to Modern Web Conference. But I'm going to be posting updates as that gets a little bit closer. But it is something that I've wanted to do, and I'm glad I'm getting my first opportunity for that. I don't think it's ever going to be something I do a ton, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it should be fun. It's going to be very different because it'll be a virtual one. I think I'd be pretty nervous standing. I've taught in classrooms, but that's like 30 people. So I think I'd be pretty nervous standing on a stage. But let me scroll down a little bit here and check the chat a bit more. I just want to say a big thank you to Brent for keeping control of the spam. I appreciate it. Can you make a video of how to create infographics, which has the maximum use of before and after pseudo classes? Why do you want the maximum use of before and after? I'm just curious. I use before and after a lot, if you notice, for decorative elements. I've never really done a lot of infographic stuff. I mean, it could be something fun to do. Danny, thank you for jumping in. T Kinter is in Python. So yeah, I don't know enough about that. I'm not a Python. I know nothing about Python at all. Welcome to the chat, Danny. Thank you for coming in. Parth developer, talking about testing in terms of every possibility with portrait, landscape, iPhone, Android, etc., etc., etc. So part of it is having different devices you can actually test on. We were just talking about like when you simulate a device through the DevTools and like, portrait, the mobile mode and stuff, like it's a nice first step. But actually having different devices to test on is super important. So there's also like cross compatibility testing.com or something like that. Like there's services you can use that will also run it through a full gamut of devices and you can see what it's going to be looking like. In terms of breakpoints and things like that with media queries or however else you're doing responsiveness, it does depend a little bit. But don't target devices, target where your design starts breaking. Because when you target specific devices, then you're going to leave like loopholes and problems. And there's a million different devices at a million different screen sizes, and people on computer, if you're on a big screen, it doesn't mean you're using your whole window. And if you're on a laptop, maybe you're not full screen there either. And who really knows what the user's getting? So for the responsive side or adaptive side of things, and just playing with it is a big part of it, and trying to get, I always try and do as few media queries as possible in terms of, or as few breakpoints as possible. So I'll use those breakpoints a lot for different elements, but I try and limit how many breakpoints I need, as much as reasonable, right? Like if your design's falling apart and something doesn't look good, you might need a breakpoint. But in terms of all the other things, part of it's just knowing what works on different browsers too, through experience. Can I use is really helpful. But at the end of the day, you need to just test on as many devices as you can get your hands on, which can be hard. I mean, it depends. If you're a freelancer and you're working out of your house and you only have your phone and your computer, it can be a little bit hard. You can try and buy used iPhones, buy used Android phones, just to get like a range of different, so you're running Safari on an iPhone, you're running different browsers on the Android device. You have a cheap laptop, just so you can see what it looks like there. Things like that. Try and get your hands on a few different things. It's always a good idea. Let's see what else is happening here. The chat is going by fast. On that metal guitar covers this time about how to come up with sensible breakpoints. I really just look at when a specific design starts falling apart. I do find that the more I do it, the more I'm using very similar breakpoints for everything, because generally speaking, if your font sizes are similar from one project to the next, like the breakpoints are going to be very similar one project to the next. So I sort of have the same starting point, and then I'll make adjustments if I need it. But look at what the design looks like and see where it starts falling apart is sort of where I start, at least. I stopped dying asked about app media for print. I should do it one day. I dove into it once, and there's so much that I don't know about the stuff you can do in there, and I started really going in a deep rabbit hole, and I just ran away. But for simple stuff, I could maybe one day do some content on it. RAM, no, I wouldn't put. Is it okay to have copied projects on my resume even though the concepts regarding it are clear? No, I wouldn't do it, just because they might have already seen it like 100 different times. If you're doing, like, say, a front-end mentor project, like they've seen so many people do that front-end mentor project, and turn it into your own thing. Like, take whatever you learn. If the concepts are clear, then just take it and do something else using the same concepts that's your own, instead of being based on somebody else's project. Because there might be a ton of people who've already done it. The recruiter or whoever's looking at it might recognize it and go, I know that's not yours. And in those cases, they don't know what you've actually done. They don't know if you built that yourself or if you just followed along line by line watching a tutorial. So, and if it's from a popular thing, they will recognize it. So just be really careful with that. Thank you very much, Danny. Thank you for the happy 200K. I would give a bigger super chat, but you see the way my bank account is set up. No problem at all. I appreciate it. That's really generous of you. Thank you very much. Sahaj Ranipa asked, what would I like to see in CSS4? There has been some chatter about maybe CSS4 will actually be a thing. More for marketing purposes than anything else. Maybe I'm out of date on this, and maybe they have talked about it, but there shouldn't be ever a CSS4 or HTML6. Both are set up, like when they made HTML3, everything got broken off into its own system. So like there are many things that are at level 1. Grid is at, did they start at 3? Whatever. That's at like the base. There are a lot of different parts of CSS that are actually on level 4 now, but everything is independent one from the other now. And this is to allow, because CSS got so big, they can update it each piece individually, because it used to be they'd have to update everything at once, and that's why it took so long to even get CSS3. So now they can add one feature, or they can improve, let's say subgrid is coming, so that's going to be part of like level 2 of grid. So that subgrid is getting added at that stage, whereas something else might be on level 5 and getting added over there. So everything is on its own stepping stones. That said, the updates I would like to see the most is subgrid being implemented. That is the one thing I've been waiting for. It's been teased to us because Firefox supports it, and I'm really, really, really hoping that it comes to the other browsers. I really think it's going to be a huge game changer in terms of creating layouts, a huge one. So I'm really hoping the other browsers get on it. And container queries is being worked on now. And I think those two together, like I'm a layout person. The primary focus of what I do is layout. And those two container queries are, I'm not sure which would actually be a bigger game changer. Container queries might be a bigger game changer. But I'd be happy if like 2021 gave us subgrid, 2022 gives us container queries. I like browser support, and I'll be super happy. Lucien Chu has super chatted. Thank you very much. That's super generous of you. Thank you very much. There's no comment or any question or anything, just a super chat. So I really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much for the generosity. I saw a question and then my chat just jumped, but it said, what is better, M or REM for responsiveness? I have several videos that look at it. So you can go just search for that, but it depends on what you're using them for. So REM are better for some things, M are better for other things. For font sizes, REM, except for sometimes you might want to use an M depending. Like if it's in a span, maybe you want it to be an M. There's different things and different situations for everything. So it depends. And I know it sucks getting an it depends answer, but that is the truth of it. Five-leaf clover is talking to someone else, but explain. Oh, okay, never mind. They're asking to get clarification on somebody's question that I missed. Richard said the browser stack where you can test all your devices. Yeah. Raj asked why people choose WordPress Elementor instead of strong backend CMS. Well, WordPress is fine. I think people choose WordPress because they're familiar with it. There's tons of resources. It's not that hard to get into. Elementor they use because they don't know how to make a website without it. And generally speaking, it's heavy and slow, and but it enables people that have a design background to make some stuff. So I do think that is a big part of it. Sumit Kumar, thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. I'm happy that my videos have helped get you out of some of the problems you've run into along the way. So thank you very much for that. Very generous. Marco, container queries would be really nice. Yeah, they're just starting. It's going to be a long time before they actually get implemented in browsers, I'm guessing. But my goodness, it's going to be wonderful. Angelos, I have videos that dive into margin and padding, so you can look for those if you want more detail. But basically, margin is white space with, it's empty, push things away, and padding is space inside the element. So you're adding, it comes with like the background. That's the main way I differentiate the two. And if ever you're not sure which one to use, choose one. If it's the wrong one, you switch to the other one. And if you don't see a difference one way or the other, there's probably no background on there. I won't say it doesn't matter at that stage, but if you're really just learning and getting to grips with how everything's working, if it looks the way you want it to look, just be happy and you can probably keep going. Have I tried out Brave? Which one do you prefer? Firefox or Chrome? So I use Chrome mostly day to day, and then jump into Firefox sometimes because it's open. I use Firefox as my development browser, especially for CSS, because the dev tools are better for CSS specifically. And I'm not a fan of Brave, so I don't use it. What Hogwarts house am I in? I don't know. I never did one of those tests. I have no idea. Have I ever used Mac OS? Yeah, I worked half my life has been on Mac OS. I don't like it as much as Windows, so I don't use it. It has made a few things a little bit harder, but overall, I've been fine with it. Figma or Adobe XD? Both? I think both of them do wonderful jobs. I think they're both really cool. I like both of them. I haven't used Adobe in a while. I actually want to go back to playing with it just because it's been a while since I've used it. I'm comfortable with Figma now, but I think they're both cool. Parth developers asking, nowadays is PHP gone or is it still alive in the market? It's huge still. You don't hear about it. It's not the sexy language, but it's still big. It's still really big. Anna Katrina Montero asked, have I ever tried coding backend? No, I don't. Not really. I mean, I've probably done a few things along the way, but it's not. I don't touch that. I'm not even front end. I'm front of the front end, like all the way in the front. Joe Williams, Bootstrap, Materialize, Bolimer. I can't comment on frameworks because I don't use them enough. Man, this chat is all over the place. Thank you very much, Otto. I might have missed that one earlier. It looks like there's a super chat from Otto as well. So thank you very much for that. Super generous of you. I'm trying to keep up with the chat, and it like as I'm scrolling down, it just shifts all of a sudden, and I really lose track. So one of the reasons that I don't like, I see someone saying that Brave's blocking Tracker and Adblock. Adblock to me as a creator, and I'm not saying this because, like as I said earlier, my primary income is not YouTube. But if you're running ad blockers, that means you're taking money away from the people making the content, and that means that content might not be free anymore. So we all complain about like we want an open web, we want everything to be open source, but you know, if you're a newspaper, all these newspapers are going out of business because people put ad blockers and don't want to pay the $5 a month or whatever they want to charge. People get angry when they put it behind a paywall, but then they block the ads. You can't, you know, somebody's creating that and someone has to get paid for it. If ads are the way that you can get access to that content for free, I think it's important to allow that. If, you know, for me on YouTube, it's not my primary source of income. So if you're running an ad blocker, you're not seeing them for me. I'm not going to complain one way or the other. But it definitely, if you're letting ads run anywhere, like, or even if it's just websites you really like and you're adding them to a whitelist, maybe, you know, something like that could be good. As far as the tracking goes, yeah, I do agree. Tracking is a big problem. I like Firefox for that. Firefox is really good at, like, they even have things to like compartmentalize things a bit. They block Facebook tracking a lot. And all of that. It's one thing I think Google's never really going to do, just because Google's business model, like there's Chrome is based with Google, who make most of their money through knowing as much about you as possible. So there's, you know, anything that's privacy there is a little bit iffy. It's just it's more the approach that I don't have anything wrong with, like I don't see anything wrong with Brave as a general thing, but it's like we're gonna block ads but then run other ads so we can make money off of it, and maybe I'm mixing that up, but like I did a lot of reading on it at one point and it seemed a little bit like them trying to profit instead of the actual creators of the content. And I know they have a way of distributing income back to them, but it's not the same thing, in my opinion. Another super chat from Lucian. Thank you very much, Lucian Chu. You got my first and second time for sending super chat. Nothing special. Just want to say congrats. Your tips helped a lot. A million thanks. Thank a million thanks to you for the super chats. It's insanely nice of you. Samuel, do I wish there was a parent selector or a containing selector? I mean, I could see the usefulness of it. Maybe with there is the if they find a good way to implement container queries, it could lead to potentially some sort of parent selector. I just don't know if it's actually possible. And I can get by without it. There are some times where it would be really nice, and then you sort of have to come up with a bit of a hacky solution to an alternative way of doing something. It's just like the potential for recursive issues that just crash the browser, I think with a parent selector is too high. So I think that's why it's never going to happen. So I don't even want to get my hopes up for that. Where do I see the future of web development and programming in the world of post-COVID economic crisis? I think it's just going to keep chugging along. It's a huge industry that's going to keep growing, I think. I think more, you know, I think with COVID, a lot of businesses shifted more online than ever had been before. If you were doing e-commerce and offering that to like implement it for restaurants and stuff, you might have done really well for yourself, helping small companies out with that. But I just think that I think it's not going anywhere or slowing down. Dysphoria O Blues. Does anyone else want Kevin to make a podcast? I have thought about it in the past. I just don't know what to talk about. I don't know what I would do. So, you know, I find there is, if you don't know about it, look up just the CSS podcast. It's with Adam Argyle and Una Kravitz. Wonderful, super good. And I didn't think CSS could be something to be podcasted about, but they do such a wonderful job. And I don't know what I would talk about. So, and I have other stuff I'm working on, but I don't know if I'm at the most recent chat. When will the courses, so somebody, Josh Velema, when will the courses be available again? If you mean CSS Demystified, I'm hoping for June or July. My SAS course, I'm hoping for April. Sumit, I do this full time, so that's, but I will answer. Sumit asked, how do I manage my time between my primary job and YouTube? So for 4 years, I created YouTube videos on the side and generally did 1 video a week. So the way I did it was I would work during the day. I would get home from work, make supper, spend time with my family. And then on Mondays and Tuesdays, I would go down and make YouTube videos. So usually it was 1 day of setting things up, getting everything going, and then recording a video, and then the next day editing it. Or a lot of time it would be you'd have like a day of creating something to get ready, a day to record it, and a day to edit the video. Is how I would do it, because I would go down at like 9 o'clock at night, and those days I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning for work. I had to be up at like 5:40. So I got up at like 5:30, and so at night I would go down and do my videos, and did that for 4 years, and it got me to where I am now. It is, I think, one of the reasons I know a lot of people saying I should have more subs and everything. I think part of the reason my growth was slower than some other channels is just because I was doing 1 video a week, and sometimes I took breaks because it was important to take breaks and not burn out. So I would take breaks sometimes, and so that slowed me down a little bit. And now I'm at 2 videos a week, and I'll probably just stick with that. But content creation is my full-time job now, so it'd be much easier to make videos and all of that now. Guitar jams, you're on the grind to get your first job. Good luck. It's not easy getting the first one, but good luck with it. I'm sure you can grab it and it'll come faster than you think. Do I think Bootstrap is necessary? I think no, I don't. You might run into a job that uses it and then you learn it. But if you have a really good understanding of CSS, you'll pick it up fast. Mr. Anderson, what would be the must-know CSS properties? The must-know, all of them. There's so many. I don't know though. It's a hard one to answer. It's just something that like the more you do, the more you learn them. Anything to do with fonts, anything to do with fonts, padding, margin, display flex, how flex works. But the more, it's one of those. I think one of the things with any web development, one of the issues with it is the more you learn, the more you realize there's a lot more to learn. So it is a bit tricky, but like there's so many, it's hard to sort of say like focus on these and you'll be fine. David Williamson, I'm okay at managing small projects and individual pages, but struggling to wrap my head around huge projects and managing SaaS. Do you have any good tips for large pages or large projects? It's definitely a learning curve, and you have to approach things differently. With SaaS, it helps because you can have partials, but whatever it is, like make sure, like literally print off all the pages, like the designs, if you have them, print them all off, take a pen and paper and start finding similar elements. Like obviously your headings, you have similar things there. Then like you might have a button and the button is the same everywhere. So a circle that highlighted in a certain color. Components are going to be like the little components are this color, then like bigger components that are made up of little components are going to be a different color. Try and componentize as much as possible, and focus on layout as one thing and content as another thing. So some components will control your layout, and then you can plug a component into there that's just going to live in the space that it's been given. It's hard to vocally answer it. But yeah, that's sort of the main approach that I try and take, if that helps at all. Metal guitar covers. A lot of guitar people in here. What is the best way to check for IE11? Open up IE11. If you're on Mac OS, obviously it's a little bit harder. You can spin up a VM just to run it on there and nothing else, but that would work. Pratham Ade, is SAS necessary? I think it's really popular and it's really big out there, so it might be something that a lot of jobs are looking for. That said, there's probably a lot of jobs that don't require it either, but it depends a little bit, I guess. Jared, thank you very much for the super chat. You work as a full stack dev and my videos have been a great help for front-end work. Your videos keep getting better and better. It's been fun watching you go. Thank you very much, Jared. It's been very generous of you with the super chat. I appreciate that very much, and I'm glad my videos have helped you out. Do you want to know what my most watched video is? The single most watched video? I'll see if anybody, like without going and searching, if anybody has any ideas. I'll see if the chat catches up on that. Hey Kevin, I want to ask, I'm not reading your name because it's in Chinese characters and I apologize, but I don't know. But hey Kevin, I want to ask that should we still need to be concerned about SMACs or BEM structural concepts in styled components? If you're only using styled components, then you don't really need them. If you're using things that aren't in it, I think those ideas and that types of things are still, BEM is out there, it's still there. So knowing how it works, understanding it, I think is important. There's now Cube CSS, there's other ones as well. There's so many different approaches. I think it's good to know different naming conventions and understand a bit of the idea behind them. Again, I always think that it's not important to necessarily know a thing, it's to know why and how it works. Like, so why is BEM even a thing? Because it gets you thinking about things a little bit differently. I do think that there's issues with styled components when everything is a styled component. I understand the idea. I think it's a cool tool. But if I've seen projects where there's so much repetition and so much stuff because it's all so self-isolated that you're just writing the same code over and over and over again, and that's a bit of an issue too. Rodolfo Silva, thank you very much. My opinion on Tailwind. So since I wasn't going to talk about it, but since he super chatted it, I think it's really cool. I've already talked about it. It's the reason that I'm saying I wasn't going to talk about it. But I think it's a really awesome tool. I think it serves a very good purpose. It's not for me. I don't like what the HTML looks like when using it. I think that people use it. I think it's a really great way to mock things up, to work really quickly. I think that if you're using it the way it was intended to be used, it could also be a really awesome tool. It can end up with like the smallest CSS files you'll ever see after you run a purge CSS on it and everything. So like there's a lot of benefits to it. I like actually writing my CSS, and I don't like how it's all done in the HTML. For me, it's just not how I like to work. But I see the benefits. I see why people like it. I think it's going to stay for a long time. I think it's going to be very popular. It won't take over. It's not going to be something that every single project and every single user ever is using, but it's definitely going to be around. I think it'll be around for a long time. So if it's something, and especially if you're a JavaScript person who doesn't want to dive deep into the world of CSS, but you can understand what's going on there, I think that could be a nice tool. But I do think that the more you know actually CSS, like I said this earlier on, but if you know CSS really well, you'll be better with Tailwind, and you'll be better with Bootstrap or Bulma or whatever it is. The more you know the core language, the better you are using the tools that rely on that language. So even if Tailwind gets the job done, knowing actually how CSS works and why you're doing things the way you are, you'll probably be more efficient with even Tailwind. Nikhil, the easiest freelance site for starting. I did an interview yesterday on my Twitch channel with Kyle Princerew, we talked about that. So I'd recommend going and listening there because he knows more about it than I do. And he gave lots of really good advice for that. Lucian Chu, I don't have any open. Actually, that's not true. I'm updating my own website right now to link off better to what I do have. But it does link to my Scrimba courses. So I do have a free course. It's like an HTML and CSS crash course that's free on Scrimba. And I have another course that's part of their premium membership thing. So you do have to sign up for a membership with Scrimba to access that one, which is called the Responsive Design Bootcamp, which is a really in-depth, I think it's more than 10 hours. It might even be more than 15 hours, where it goes from just learning the basics of HTML and CSS to typography, layout, going into a deep dive in Flexbox, a deep dive in CSS Grid, building websites. We do several different, like a single page. We do a couple multi-page projects and stuff. So that's sort of the biggest one I have. My other courses are all closed right now. Or there's Conquering Responsive Layouts too, which is another free course. So if you just Google search Conquering Responsive Layouts, you'll find that. And then my other courses are closed right now. Some my CSS Demystified will open again, hopefully in June or July, and then it should potentially stay opened after that. Brent, yes, how to create a navbar is my most popular video. So that was actually my first video I ever made. It's a way to make a navbar that's not responsive using floats. So just that we had the other super chat that came in saying, you know, that my video has been super helpful and they've gotten better and better and better. Yet my very first video is the one that has the most views. So kind of ironic there. I didn't start with the most views. My channel took 6 months to get anybody watching anything. So it didn't start popular. It gained traction over time, but it still gets tons of views all the time. And I'm like, oh, why is the one non-responsive float-based thing my most popular video? But it is. Steve Tucker, yeah, import is deprecated. It is on the way out, so watch out. You didn't like the look of use in my video. How long can we use import? If you're using Node Sass, you can keep on using it because Node Sass isn't being updated. So like your old projects don't need to be changed. But new projects, I don't know. We'd have to check their site, but I'm pretty sure they're deprecated, and I don't know when they're actually going to be pulled completely. Samuel Dean, do I offer student discounts? I do. Not on with the Scrimba stuff. I can't though. Charges Scrimba's pricing, and my other stuff is closed, so no discounts right now. Still alive with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or in this period, should we learn React or Angular? Yeah, HTML, CSS, JavaScript all the way, and then take Angular or React or whatever it is after when you're really good with those. Some jobs you might need React or Angular and depend. Like React gets a lot of the attention these days. It's really popular with all the startups, but a lot of big companies are using Angular. So like, don't feel just because like same people are asking like, is PHP dead? It doesn't get the sexy headlines, but it's huge. So like, look at what's actually out there and what people are hiring for and what you want to be doing, what type of company you want to be. You want to work for startups, you probably want to learn React or Vue. But there's tons of businesses and tons of really big companies using Angular. So like, look at what's going on. Emmy Dell, do I feel that being a famous YouTuber makes you exposed as a person? No. I don't think I'm that famous to begin with. So that helps. I also, I'm not like a vlogger who's showing my day-to-day life. Not that anyone would want to see my day-to-day life or stuff. So like, no, I don't feel that there's been anything that I'm too stressed or on being exposed as a person. I also think like in this niche in general, like the comments, everything, the people involved in it, everything is so supportive and so amazing that I've never, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty happy. Wecker, I hope I said your name right. What name should I write my project under if my preferred name is different from my legal name? Your preferred, I mean, it depends. I'm not too sure. I don't want to give bad advice on that. So I don't actually know if there would be a difference if you didn't use like on your projects. I mean, you could use a company name, just register your company, like register a company and go under a company name, but Shivani, I'm a big fan of BEM, and I'm getting more into Cube. So those are my two big naming conventions. Sorry if I'm missing any questions along the way, everybody. The chat is going really fast. Or I know I'm missing some stuff, so I apologize if I missed your question. Oh, Steve Tucker. So the VS Code Sass compiler, it should just keep on working. It's using Node Sass. So just like I said before, if you're using Node Sass, it's the old version. It'll just keep on. It won't get updated with any of the new features. So at one point you might see something that is going on with Sass that you just can't do. And part of it is like the use and forward. I just touched on the very basics. I have a plan to look at some more in-depth and more advanced stuff you can do with them that are kind of cool. But there's other stuff too that like any updates that are coming, any new things or new developments that they add, they won't be part of Node Sass. So that extension won't be updated either, and it won't get them. I heard there's a few people that commented saying that there's a new extension that does use Dart Sass. I've known of another one that disappeared after, like it was there and then it was gone. This one, somebody said there's issues with partials. So like if there's an extension that does it, that's cool. But David, what would I do as a 1 million sub special? I think I have a while before I need to figure that out. I'm not too stressed about that for a little while. Josh Velima, isn't Angular a dying language? So it's not a language, it's a framework. Or yeah, I guess it's a framework. But no, I don't think so. It's not. I know somebody who primarily works in Angular, and they've been job hopping a lot for different reasons, but like they're job hopping because those opportunities are there. Again, I don't know if a lot of startups are coming in and creating apps or creating stuff with Angular or sites and stuff, but like you can't look at what all like you don't want to look at the hot technology. You want to look at what's out there, and like there's so. If a website was built 5 years ago, or like you're looking at like large corporations, that they're not about to just switch to React because they want to switch to React. They have something that's been there for 7 years using Angular. They're not going to make a change if Angular is working for them. It would cost them millions of dollars to switch. So Angular isn't as popular, or I won't say it isn't as popular. Well, maybe it's not as popular as it once was, but just because there's more competition, but it's not dead. I'm not saying you should learn Angular either. I'm just saying don't think that something's dead because it's not in all the headlines. That's the only thing I'm saying. Excuse me. There's a bit of discussions going on, so I'm getting the middle of conversations. Toady, and have I worked for an agency before? For web development? No. No, I've never worked at an agency. When I was doing design work, I was at a very small, I wouldn't really be an agency, it was too small. But it was sort of like that style of thing, but doing design work, but just really tiny. As far as developing goes, I've been brought into projects, but like with big teams and stuff, but it wasn't for an agency or anything like that. Hope of Glory, do my kids have an interest in web dev or programming? No, not at all. They're like, oh, that's boring. I keep trying. The older one's 9, so I keep trying to like see if I can spark a bit of interest. He is into, we get like a science kit thing that he's really into. So it's like the STEM stuff, like it's more like engineering style that he really likes. So I'm happy with that. I like it too. It's fun, fun little things. And then But just seeing the text on the screen right now is kind of boring for him. And even I've looked at, maybe I should try again, but like some of like the more kid-friendly programming stuff. But so far, the last time we did it, he had no interest. Comment Mayadus, why don't I have a complete crash course for Bootstrap? Because I don't use it, so I don't feel that it's for me. That's the main reason. I don't use it personally, so. Vyxlav, I'm messing up your name, I apologize. The stream will be up after. I'm not going to take it off, so you'll be able to get the replay on YouTube. I'll see, the chat just jumped again. Sahaj, my thoughts. One dislike on the there's one dislike. There's one dislike on the live stream. That's all right. It's not a YouTube video if there's no dislikes. That's how I see it. Akash, why do so many tutorials use class instead of ID for a single use selector? Because part of it is you don't always know if a project develops or grows over time, if it's going to stay a single use selector. That's part of it. So like classes, we try and compartmentalize stuff and like componentize stuff as much as possible. So something is a class, it can be used one time, but then if that project grows and you actually need, like, your main nav is styled in a specific way, but it actually gets styled in a really specific way as some like footer nav that you end up having. And like there's only some minor tweaks that it needs. Like you don't want to have to duplicate that code for no reason, or you have to all of a sudden change, like you have to refactor HTML, just go with the class and it works. I think IDs, I know we can hook into them through CSS, but the way I see it is they're much more useful for other things. Like an ID is very useful in JavaScript. Even data attributes might be more useful there, but like an ID, for me, an ID is used for anchoring. Like that's how I see an ID. I'll throw IDs on stuff so I can anchor to that. So if I have one page and I want to be able to scroll up and down or provide anchor links for something within a page, that's what the ID is there for me. And as the use case, or obviously in forms and stuff, you also need to use IDs sometimes. But when it comes to styling it, like if I have a section of my page that has an ID, I'm also giving it a class. Because usually the class for me, and it's just the way I work, but I think it's much safer using a class. You don't have to refactor after. You can just reuse that class later on if you need to. That's the way I see it. I see a comment about the newspaper that you're still being tracked. I mean, if they have advertising, yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about a long time ago. But definitely, I mean, tracking is definitely an issue. Privacy is definitely an issue, but it's going to be something that's, I think the privacy issues we're having now are going to be laughable in the not too distant future with all the types of tracking that are on the way. Because soon, like, we're going to be having face tracking and everything so soon. It's going to be a different world for that, and it sucks that we even have, like, the fact that government oversight has to be a part of it is really crappy. It should be things that are easy to opt out of. I agree, if you pay for a service, it'd be nice if they're not tracking you anyway. But I do think there's a difference between tracking and blocking, and I think there's other ways of avoiding to be tracked than using. You can get out of tracking without blocking ads. So if you're using a free service, at least like they can continue to provide that free service. How's that? Steve Tucker, you're old and slow learner, so you need more tutorials. Yeah, don't worry, I'll be doing quite a bit on SAS. Parth, I don't know if it's a backend. Find someone else to ask. I don't know, but I mean, Java's been big for a long time, so but I can't give an educated opinion on it. Should you learn Rust and WebAssembly instead of React and Angular for the long term? again, don't think I'm in the right spot to be able to comment on that one. My favorite CSS framework is just writing CSS. Guitar James, I don't consider myself the king of CSS, no. I appreciate that people think I'm really good at it, and I mean I think I'm good, but I think I'm very good at. I think I'm good with CSS, and I think that my main skill though is being able to communicate what I know. So I think that's, you know, that helps on that side of things. And I know it's really hard to see, but there's the white book right there is CSS secrets. Which way to the post office? PHP is massive. Yeah. Any project ideas for beginners? Check out, there's frontendmentor.io, I think, whatever, Frontend Mentor, just Google that. And there's another one too that's very similar to Frontend Mentor, but I never remember it. So they provide you with projects to work on. David Chan, I've updated my switches. So I had maybe 5 or 6 videos where I had the blues. Now I've switched to some silent cherry red, so they're a little bit quieter now. But I'm using the Ergo Docs Easy. Toting Games, is it cheaper to program your own website instead of hiring somebody? It depends. How much if you have to learn everything and program it and you're starting from zero, and depending on what your hourly rate is or your value for your time, it might be cheaper to hire someone. If you already know what you're doing, you know. Toting Games, PHP is like it links into databases. It's made for, someone else in the chat will answer better than I am, but think of it like a templating language a little bit, but it'll pull the information out of databases to get it. So a lot of websites are built with WordPress, which is built on PHP. So you set up like templates in there, tell it to insert whatever information it needs, and then it will check the database, grab the information from there, and insert it into the page. La Bombastic UFA, you helped me a lot doing the small video tutorials like margin. Yeah, I think I enjoy those little videos where we focus on like one specific topic. I like doing stuff like that. Did you know that Stack Overflow has a homepage? D&D Tabayan. It says boosting. I thought we were going to get into an alcohol discussion there, but I think you meant boosting. Boosting YouTube videos on Facebook affects algorithm. Probably not. I'm not a YouTube expert. It's taken me a long time to get here, and people grow much faster than I do. So maybe the wrong person to ask about that type of thing. But I think as far as YouTube goes, actually, it could affect the algorithm depending. If you're getting a lot of people to watch, like if you run ads to even on like people run YouTube video ads to their YouTube videos, if you're not running it to people who are going to sit there and watch that video, it's going to affect the performance of that video, because you might get, say a normal video gets 100 views and all of a sudden you get 5,000 views, but those 5,000 people who come in stop watching after 10 seconds. That's a negative signal to YouTube, because YouTube's seeing it as people are coming in and they're leaving right away, so they're not interested in that video. So that would be a negative signal. So if you are increasing views, you have to make sure it's to the audience that is going to actually watch that video, because if not, it could have a negative consequence. Kavisha, can I make a video about website delivery process to a customer from start to finish? I don't have, well, I sort of could do something like that now, actually. I'm working on something for somebody, and I will be making content from that, but it's not a start to finish from scratch. Like they have an existing thing that I'm making some changes to, but and I'm making some content on that, so that might help. But we'll see. Maybe we could do something a bit more in depth. Shivani Rawat, Web Dev Simplified, is currently working on a JavaScript course, intermediate advanced. He has a beginner one too that's reopening soon once that one's ready. So there's that. Wes Boss has some great JavaScript content. Brad Travesty Media has great JavaScript content. So there's a lot to choose from. Is Codecademy a good place to learn to code? I've used it for some stuff, but it was never a thing. Like I played with Python once in it just for fun, and done other stuff. So, and I think it's changed a lot. Like I looked at it 5 years ago maybe, and then I was back on it for something. I think I recommended it to somebody. At one point, and it was a little bit different. But I mean, if anybody else here in the chat has any recent experience with it, maybe it could help. I don't have enough experience to say it's great or it's not. Is a dual core Intel Celeron enough to get into web development? Some npm installs might take you a while, but if you're just writing the very core HTML and CSS and some basic JavaScript stuff, you could probably do it. Panos, no experience there, sorry. Have I ever, the chat jumped again, so I might not see who it was. Oh, there we go. Otto asked if I ever thought about creating my own CSS framework. No, I will be releasing a video in the not too distant future that's looking at like my starter template. It's not a framework, but it's full of utility classes and other stuff that gets me started, and I can have like, it's like a framework light, sort of. So maybe, it's really not like a full-fledged framework by any means, though. It's like really just like a starting template that I use. So I'm fixing it up a bit, and I'll have a video on that and a GitHub repo available in the not too distant future. For front-end developer, should you focus more on CSS before learning JavaScript in depth? It depends what you want to do. So it depends is a big part of it. I learned HTML and CSS really well before I learned JavaScript, and I learned jQuery first. But if the JavaScript side of things is more interesting to you, learn JavaScript first. You don't have to be proficient at all three. There's JavaScript's huge, and just getting into that side of things and then working with people who are good at the other side of things is perfectly valid. How to make a responsive circle using CSS. There's a padding trick. Look up like a CSS padding trick for aspect ratios. You can make sure that the width and the height are always the same with that. And then a border radius 50%. And now we do look up my video on aspect ratio, because we have an aspect ratio, it's just browser support's not perfect yet. Why did you switch to design field? I was a designer first, and then I got into web more. It was more of I was doing both, and then I started teaching. And so it's been a bit all over the place for me, to be honest. It's just sort of what happened. How were you coping with the time period around the year 2000 when everyone was fighting against the use of JavaScript? Users were encouraged to disable JavaScript and sites were developed to be non-JS dependent. I wasn't even aware of it, but I was, it was a hobby of mine in 2000, like big time hobby. So I don't know. Go check out Hayden Pickering's website. You can't visit it unless you disable JS. I think there's an over reliance on JavaScript today, if that. So I don't. Yeah, I think there's a huge over reliance on JavaScript for some things these days. Well, I say that, but then like I'm using 11t, which is built on JavaScript. But anyway, I don't. I think there was a bunch of spam coming in at one point. So if you do have a question, I'll hopefully get to it, but just don't spam your comments, please. Alex, I'm doing good. How are you? Eduardo, yeah, it's definitely worth learning to code. The page builders only get you so far. I talked about it a lot more earlier in the stream, so I won't jump into it too much now. But who inspired me? No one inspired me. So how's this? I'll switch that up a little bit. But to get into it, it was literally a hobby of mine for a long time. So like I was just building websites because it was fun. Then I saw it as an opportunity to make money, so more money when I was freelancing. So I jumped on that. And that helped on that side of things. And so I guess in one way, part of the motivation was I always had an interest in it from very early on. It was something that I just liked doing. And then when I realized I could make money by doing it, it was more motivation to take it seriously. In terms of YouTube and actually creating content, my main inspiration would be Travis Nielsen, who was the guy who ran the Dev Tips channel for years. I was a huge fan of his channel and what he was doing there. And that was like, for me, I'd started teaching, and so I was doing a lot less web development. And that was like some of the stuff he was up to. It was just fun staying up to date with CSS pretty much at the time. And that was sort of just seeing what's going on there, keeping up with different things and learning. And he great personality, so it was fun to follow his channel. And then he stopped making videos, and there was nothing that really replaced it for me. And so I sort of replaced it by making my own videos instead. And that was how I started pushing myself and continuing to learn and making sure that I was keeping up with everything. If you don't know of DevTip's channel, it's, he hasn't made videos in years now, so but some of the stuff in there is still gold. I would definitely recommend anyone check it out. Vince from Winnipeg would like to see a video about development with Git and Gulp on the same project. I don't know if I'm going to do, I have moved away from Gulp. I mean, we could look at it anyway. I've moved away from it a little bit more recently. I will be looking at getting projects running. The next big project I do, I'll do it like including GitHub with the pull requests and everything though. And we'd look at like getting it published or not published, but like hosted and everything. I see a mention of the Net Ninja. Yes, very good stuff. Ahmed, why don't I like Tailwind? It's just not for me. I like writing CSS. I enjoy CSS. It's what it's what my channel's about. It's what I do. I really enjoy it. So like it sort of takes that out of your hands a little bit. So it's just like the way I see it. It's not my ideal way to go. But for other people, if that's your jam, and I think they do a lot of good things too. So like, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's not the right tool to use. It's just not the tool for me. James Brando, yeah, check out, I've said it a few times, but go to my Twitch channel. I did an interview yesterday with Kyle Prinsloo about, like, I think maybe half the interview or a quarter of the interview, we talked about that type of thing. So I'd recommend you check that out. Guitar jams, how I got my job thing, I don't think can apply to anybody and how it's been going. Like, I got a job I was doing design work first, so I was like working at a small design place that didn't pay very well, so I was doing freelance stuff on the side. The first work I was getting was from people I knew. It was like I did a coffee shop website because somebody I knew sort of that I was into like designing and stuff like that, and I made, they asked if I knew how to make a website, and we worked out something. I did something else. It was an online contact that I had that I knew they needed a website, so I asked if I could build it for them. And a lot of the early stuff was just that. And then I got some extra work after that from referrals from them. But freelancing was never my primary income. So that's also like on that side of things, it's hard for me because I was never searching for jobs. It was just like if things came up, it worked out well for me. And then the design place I was working at, I just got lucky with timing. Is pretty much they had someone quit the day before I applied, and so they took me for whatever reason. I was out of school, And then I was doing, I mean, all my development experience is freelance work. And then, whether it's been individual clients or I've been brought into projects and been brought into bigger teams to work with them, it's always been freelance stuff that I've done. So like getting hired at a job, I've had some terrible interviews that didn't work out. When I got my teaching job, it was the worst interview of my life, but they still hired me for some reason. So yeah, when it comes to getting hired, actually, I don't know if Danny's still in the chat. There's Danny Thompson. If you're looking to get hired for your first job, he has a free series on YouTube on how to set up your LinkedIn profile properly and take advantage of a LinkedIn profile to actually get hired instead of just like having a LinkedIn profile that's sitting there. It's a free series on YouTube. I would definitely recommend it out. And like he's for that type of stuff, like great. So follow him on Twitter, but definitely it's Danny Thompson. Yeah, I don't know if he's here anymore. He was in here for a while, but definitely I think that could be one resource at least to check out, to like sort of give yourself a chance in that, because LinkedIn's a hard place. I don't get it, but that could help out. My chat just jumped again, so I don't know who asked, but I saw something that was asking about a roadmap. I find it hard to give roadmaps. I sort of talked about it a bit before, just everybody's journey is a little bit different. It depends what you want to do, what type of projects you want to be working on, what type of job you want to get, what you want to be doing. Like, I find it hard to give an actual. Phil Watts, does minifying CSS make a difference? Yeah, it does. We wouldn't do it if it didn't. Minifying, gzipping, it makes a difference. I'd also argue like you should, before you minify, to use purge CSS. Especially if you're using something, if you're using Tailwind and you're not purging your CSS, like it's part of their whole thing, right? So make sure you're set up properly with that. But that's how you go from like a really big CSS file from, even if you're using Bootstrap, get purge in there because it's going to make your CSS file so much smaller. But you can even compare it, like look at your CSS file and then minify it and look at the file and see what the file size difference is. And if you can save a few kilobytes with no work, because minifying should be part of a build process, it shouldn't be like a manual thing you're doing. So if it's part of a build process that's happening hands off and you're saving yourself kilobytes of space, then it's worth it. Wecker, I love Git. The only problem with Git is that everyone has their own version. What do you mean by that? You shouldn't all be working on your own version. You should be, I mean, you each have your own branch where you're doing your own thing, but like everybody should have their own specific thing they're working on. So you make your branch off the master, you do what you need, and then you pull back into the master. You can have issues, obviously, where you're working on something for a while and then, the base file's really out of date because other people have been pulling in. But hopefully if it's compartmentalized enough, it shouldn't be an issue. It can be an issue, but yeah. Emran, can I do a course on CSS Grid like you did for Flexbox? Do I have a Flexbox course? Or do you mean like I have a series on YouTube. I have CSS Grid content, you're right. I don't have something specific like here, let's learn Grid, which surprised me. When I look back on my content and I didn't have that, I was a little surprised. Dividas, do I use any CMS or do you just do front end and hand it over to developers? It depends on the project. I used to do a lot of WordPress stuff. I haven't touched it in years, like 6 years at least now. 5 years at least now. I'd say 5 years, let's say, to be safe. But so I have done lots of WordPress stuff. I'm looking, a lot of the other things I've been doing, I've just been doing the front end and handing off, but not even handing off, just like that wasn't this part of the project I'd be responsible for. So I didn't have to worry about any of the back end or any of the implementation. I just had to worry about the front endy stuff. But yeah, see, I mean, when I was doing freelance stuff for individual clients, the main thing I would be doing would be WordPress sites. And WordPress gets a bad rap. You can have a very fast, very performant WordPress site. The reason they get a bad rap is because a lot of the themes out there are terrible. If you make a nice lightweight theme, like you can have super nice performance on WordPress. WordPress isn't the problem. It's the bad stuff that's built on WordPress that's the problem. Guitar jams. You're also a graphic design person. Cool. Yeah, I have one interview right now on the YouTube channel about freelancing, and then the other two will be eventually on YouTube. But there's two that you can find on the Twitch channel that I'm going to edit a bit and then eventually bring over to here. What's a demo scene, Panos? A CSS.js demo scene. I don't know what demo scene is. What's my favorite font? My old favorite font was Basic Sans, which was the brand font. It's where all my YouTube thumbnails lately have been using it and everything else. I still really like it. I think it's a great font. But I'm playing around with Alaska right now. I'm not sure if I love it as much, but I've been enjoying it. Why Shopify is underrated? Is it? I don't know. It's pretty big. If you need like just something, I mean, the problem I guess with Shopify, like WooCommerce is huge, right? And then people are already familiar with WordPress, so it's easy just to add something like WooCommerce to it. But Shopify is pretty big. I've never used it. I've thought about making some content on it though, like making a custom theme or something. Ahmed, I'm trying to make something like the Twitter sidebar position sticky is not enough to do it. I think we chatted about that once, no? Or maybe it was someone else who had a similar question. Yeah, I mean, it's something I could definitely take a look at one point. How big is your wardrobe? I've never seen a video with the same shirt twice. You have to watch more of my videos. I'll film like especially now that I'm doing it more often, I'll wear one shirt for like, and I'll record 4 videos in a row. So, I've also changed, like if you watch my older stuff and my newer stuff, it's different because as I said, I used to go to work and then I'd get home from work, do my stuff, and then come downstairs to record. So I was always wearing like my button down shirts. Now all my newer content is t-shirts because I'm just at home and I don't have to go anywhere. And I did get a whole bunch of, like I got I had a good amount of t-shirts when I knew that I'd be working at home and that I didn't have to wear button downs anymore. I still like them, but it's just, I don't know, if I can wear a t-shirt, I will. If I didn't have to walk my kids to the bus stop, I'd probably be in shorts too. I saw my chat keeps jumping as I'm scrolling down. I like Brent wears button up. I like button up still. I still wear them sometimes, but a lot of the time I won't. When you have a website with several pages and the style.css gets huge, do you use separate CSS style files? Or I have one main CSS file. If you really are worried about performance, you can also look into critical CSS. There's a few different things that can do it, but it happens automatically. Well, they'll like it's part of a build process. It's post-processing. Well, they're going to put it in after the fact. They add in like inline CSS for the like the above the fold stuff, which can help with performance a little bit if you have a really big CSS file. Legacy Terror. Another question. I guess I should do a course on grid because there's a few people that have asked for it now. Using important in CSS. I think that if it's something that's important, that it's okay to use important, but you should be very, very, very careful with using important. Mary Dazig, how often do we go on Twitch? So yeah, a few people asked, oh, 1 second. I see a super chat that I missed earlier. Sorry about that. Chubby Shady. CSS, easy to learn, difficult to master. Is that true? I think it's deceptive at the beginning. So it's easy to learn the syntax and learn the very basics, background blue, color white, font family. So the very, very basics of it, I think, are, yes, easy to learn. The syntax is simple and the very basics of it are easy. But as soon as you get into layout, and that's where it can get pretty hard. And I would say just focusing on one thing at a time can make it a lot easier. Thank you also very much for the super chat. It's super generous of you. Parth, thank you for the Q&A. You're welcome. But Mary asked about Twitch. So a few people asked about live streaming, I think. So I'm live usually every Monday at 9 or 9:30 Eastern for a few hours. Lately, I've been working on my own site. I'll do other stuff too, but always just live coding stuff. I'm occasionally live during the week playing Among Us too, if you're interested. And maybe later this week I'll be live. If I'm doing something and I think it would be a decent, like I'm just working on something and it would be a good live stream, I'll do a live stream of that too. But at least once a week on Mondays. Chubby Shady, why am I so humble? Canadian, I guess. It might be part of it. Programming with as is. Do I use Django for backend? I don't do any backend work. So if I'm doing something that requires it, I'm working with someone else and I let them make that decision. How to be good with vertical, how to be really good with vertical spacing. Is there guidelines for it? Look up, I mean, it depends on what type of vertical spacing you're talking about. If you want like a flow, there's principles of design that will talk a lot about document flow and things like that. You can look up modular scales. You can look up, I have some issues with vertical spacing when it's all the same, but having it based on like a ratio can be a good thing. So it depends a little bit, but I mean, yeah, look up like vertical flow. There's even like, there's some complicated setups though sometimes. You work in a robe most of the time. Oh, thank you very much, Oscar, for the super chat. I like the little, thank you very much. It's super, super generous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Greetings from Mexico. I'm glad that you could come and join us. Tao, yeah, if you know CSS really well or you know Sass, like learning Bootstrap or something similar is not giving you new powers or new abilities. It's using what you already know to do stuff maybe a little bit faster. So it depends on if you need to learn it or not. But if you know CSS really well, you could pick up different things much quicker. Is it true that deploying a completely new website will destroy Google rankings? It could have a huge influence, yeah. I'm not an SEO expert, but what I know of SEO is a lot of it comes from like, if you've actually got a Google ranking, it's because Google it's usually blog articles and other stuff like that. You're very rarely going to have a well-ranking website for just like a homepage of a business or something, unless that's, well, okay, that's the wrong way to look at it because it depends on search intent, and there are obviously businesses that rank depending on the search that people put in. But if you have a website that's ranking really well, and you have to look at how are they finding your site. But if they're coming in through blog articles and then you just scrap the whole thing and put a new site up there and that article's not there anymore, then all that is gone and it's a broken link. Or you could even put in some redirects, but it better redirect to the same article because that's why people are going there. So like you have to look at how people are finding the site, why it's ranked where it is, what search terms they're using to get to it. So like for me on my site redesign that I'm doing right now, I have to figure out, the biggest problem I've run into right now is the permalinks for my blog articles are different than what they were on my old system. I was using Jekyll before, I'm using Eleventy now. It's generating the permalinks differently. And my quick research on it looks like it might be a bit more work than I thought it would be to get them to be generated the same. I don't rank well on Google for very much at all, but I do bring in a couple of thousand views a month. And if all of a sudden all those are different, I don't want to have to build a redirect for every single one of them. it would all of that Google juice I did have for those articles is gone because the permalink is different. Google doesn't know where to find it, so I'd have to redirect all of them, but that's a lot of work. So I'm trying to find a way to do it easily. But I'm not an SEO expert, so just take that with a grain of salt. If you're just switching domains, that's different because you can redirect to the different domain. So James Brando, do I listen to music while programming? If so, what genre? So I switch around a lot. I like electro swing a lot actually when I'm programming. Just some random lo-fi stuff as well is nice. I like just, backgroundy stuff is always good. Sometimes I'll have some rock on, but I find rock gets me too excited. It depends on the type of rock, obviously. But when it gets a bit more into the metal side of things, if it's too upbeat and too going, sometimes I like something a little bit more relaxed. Amir, responsive banners. What do you mean? Banners are it could mean a lot of different things. So, who lack any motivation? Oh God, Spanky Sully. That's so hard. So hard. Motivation. You have to find something that interests them, and that can be. I mean, I've had students. I had a lot of students with no motivation when I was teaching in class, and it's. I don't know. You try your best to find topics and interests and things, but if they're not interested in something, it's hard to make them want to learn about it. And I think part of it's personality too. Some people are more driven and than others. Just I enjoy learning. I think front end development is amazing because you're just always learning new things. I love that about it. Some people don't like to learn. They'd rather go play Fortnite, right? So it's hard. I don't know. If there's a solution to that, I'd like to know what it is too. An advertising budget of 1,000, will it be a good start? Advertising won't help with SEO, I don't think. It'll help while the ads are running, but as soon as the ads are gone, that doesn't search engine optimization is about search intent. So you need people search it. In general, you need to build links. So you need other people linking to your stuff to build up page authority. Google's not worried so much about how they don't track how long. You can have Google Analytics, but not everyone does, and the website can still rank. So they don't know how long someone's on a page for. So if you're driving traffic through AdSense, it's not going to influence your SEO. It's going to get you to the top while you're paying for the advertising, but then as soon as you stop paying, then that traffic's gone. What programming with Aziz? What did you do when I was beginning? Did I copy code from source code? It was. I mean, we could copy. When I started, there was no dev tools. I remember when Firebug became a thing in Firefox. That was the first one. I had an extension that was like the modern dev tools. That's where they developed from. You could do it a view source. That's how you would see how other people did stuff. It was also in the day when things were really messy. Everything was a different implementation. Yeah, it was hard at first. Aditya, I was working full time until 2 months ago, maybe a bit. I mean, the whole COVID thing sort of makes that. I'm not sure when I stopped working full time because I was already at home. But let's say January was when I went full time with YouTube, or not YouTube, with content creation. I've played around with Houdini. I don't have any content on it yet. I will eventually have some. Hope of Glory, do I miss working with people in person? I'm such an introvert that it doesn't bother me being by myself all the time. I mean, I enjoy spending time with people. If if go and have some drinks with my friends and stuff like that, and socialize sometimes. So even if I go and socialize, then I need a day to myself where I'm alone. I'm very much an introvert. Haynes. I think that modern JS frameworks are amazing. I think that they do some really cool and awesome stuff. I just think they're overused for things that we don't need them for. and that the vanilla options a lot of the time would work better and have less overhead and make for faster websites. But for when they're used for what they're intended to be used for, they're super awesome. Yeah, I have something planned for that, John, in the not too distant future, about a project setup video. All right, I'm gonna have to get going soon, everybody. Thank you all for coming. It's been a while that I've been live now, and I do need to go eat some food. So another 5 minutes maybe. My top 5 all-time favorite movies. Star Wars. I'm not gonna rank them. I'm a huge Star Wars fan though. I don't know why, but one of my favorite movies ever is Pool Hall Junkies. It's not a great movie, but I just really like it. I haven't watched. I'm trying to think of like more modern stuff that I've been watching, but I actually got into. I watched the original Star Wars trilogy in reverse order because it was on TV and my parents taped it, and then I just started watching it a lot. And it was episode 6, then episode 5. Like a year later, I finally saw it, and then I think it was when I finally saved up enough money to buy the trilogy that I saw episode 4 on VHS, and I still have the box set, the VHS box set. Other movies I really like. There's others that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. And for someone who studied film, like, I'm not into the classics. Geez, nothing's popping to my head. There's lots of another stupid movie that I really, really like. It's not a stupid movie, but another movie that I really, really like that's not like a classic or anything would be Major League. It's all movies that I watched like a ton as a kid, or like teenager or whatever. Amir, my biggest goal. I don't know. I'm always changing my goals. I mean, I just like help. I've been teaching for 6 years now. I've moved to online content creation about teaching. I think just like continuing to teach and help people is my current like mission and goal and stuff like that. Mujtaba Hussein, can we use jQuery and React together? Why would be my question. Hope of Glory. Interesting that introverts can connect so well with people. Maybe even better than extroverts. I think, I mean, yeah, I'm an introvert. I am shy, but not like, I know there's a difference between being like shy and being an introvert. And like I can stand in front of a class of people and talk with no, I mean, I'm nervous before I go up if it's a new group. And I used to be really shy, but I think that shyness evolved more into introversion. I think if you're super shy, it can be hard to connect just because you can't even like build that connection just because you're being too shy. But yeah, introverts, I think also I think we build up a good thing because we listen a lot more. Extroverts are too busy talking. Aditzi, I won't make it private. It's going to stay out once we're done. David Chan, I have 2 videos. I have one that's looking at how to do it with CSS only, and I have another video that looks how to you can make a dark mode using JavaScript as well. Toa, is there a site you can get mentorships from medium to advanced developers? If there is one, I don't know. That would be a cool service though, a cool thing. Programming with Aziz, it depends on the backend 100%. He's asking about the security for the website. So like mine are, I don't have to stress about it too much. Zawad, my favorite fonts. Yeah, Basic Sans was my brand font for a long time, so my favorite one. And then I moved. So I liked it because of that. I like Gotham, which is kind of whatever, but I like it. If it's Google fonts or things like that, I mean, all the classic ones look pretty good. Like, you know, like the Roboto, Railway, Poppins. There's other ones. I like Franklin Gothic a lot, which is not a web font. You can probably get it as a web font now, but stop dying. What's for lunch? It's leftovers. So whatever I had for supper last night. What did I have? Oh, roast chicken, roast veg. Reheated roasted chicken and veg. Joshua, hi from France. Bonjour. Love your tutorials. Thank you very much. Kabbalah, is jQuery still relevant in 2021? There's more websites. I think jQuery has more websites are built using jQuery than React, Angular, and Vue put together, because it was so popular for so long. So I think it's still relevant in that if you're working on a brand new website, you probably don't need to bother with it. But if you need to do any support for legacy websites, you're probably going to run into it. Dovlacar, I'm from Montreal in Quebec, Canada. A guy, I'm much better at CSS than JavaScript. Mary Dizing, do I do any one-on-one mentorships? I don't. I have a lot of people who ask me if I could. I just don't have the time to be able to do it. And I have a course, 2 courses on Scrimba. One is free, and one you have to be a member at Scrimba for. I have a free Conquering Responsive Layouts web course. If you just search Conquering Responsive Layouts, it'll come up. And I have 2 other courses that are closed right now that will be opening in the near future. Comic Sans to question mark. Comic Sans actually, it gets a lot of hate. I don't particularly like it, but it's actually really good for dyslexia and stuff. I know my wife's an elementary school teacher, so she's always using it, and I'm like, oh come on, let's mix up the fonts, let's get a bit more interesting, and she's always using it. But it is easy for kids to read. So I've never been to South America actually. Thank you, James. I've been to Europe a few times and to a bunch of places there, but I've never been to South America. I'd like to visit though. Programming with Aziz, I think it depends. I mean, I think a lot of websites are made dynamic that don't need to be. They could be static websites that are not made as static websites. So that's where I'm just saying that use the right tool for the right job. So if it's something that needs to be dynamic, then use dynamic. If it's something that can be static, then make it static. Oh, that's a good question, Daniel. Daniel Luddy. Browser add-ons you use every day and cannot imagine life without them. I use LastPass as a password manager. I've heard 1Password is a little nicer. I don't know, and I've heard it's easy to switch between them too. But I've been with LastPass for a while, so I use LastPass. That's probably the only one I couldn't live without. I have a different password for every website that are all, when possible, really big and long. I'm always annoyed when you go to generate a password and then it's like, oh, you can't have more than 16 characters. And I'm like, oh, I don't like this website. Sur la colline, oui, je peux parler le français. I'm not great, but I can do it. Cater, I'm still live. Yeah, not for much longer. Do I have any random pieces of advice? What I talked about earlier about learning, I think, is probably the best things that I can do. My best advice is just don't watch content, participate in the content. So learn with purpose, practice what you're learning, write the code that the person's writing. Don't just think you know it because you understand it. And then try doing it without watching the tutorial. Try using it in different ways and experimenting with it. I think that's the best way. Sur la Colin, would I do any meetups in Montreal when it will be allowed to meet? Yeah, I definitely would. Recadon, Scrimba's a web development learning platform, but you're watching the video, but you can actually pause the video and code in the video editor, if that makes sense. You're pausing the instructor's thing with his code, and then you can edit the code in it. So it's really, really cool. Peter Jan, yeah, I'm doing that now. I'm doing that on Twitch right now, and I will be doing some content on that on YouTube later on static site generators. Yeah. All the school assignments in Comic Sans. Zawad, I'm on a PC. I'm not a huge fan of Mac OS. Aditya, you have no idea how popular in India. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have been to Italy, Marco. I've been to Rome, Florence, and Venice. Mohammed, will CSS die in the future or get replaced? Don't think so. It does its job and it does it well, so I don't see where it would be going. And the web is one of those things that, because it's like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I don't think, unless whatever replaces it has to be able to parse CSS, because you can't change, or the browser, like, again, you'd rely on all the browsers making the change to something new. I don't see them doing that. And then what happens to all the websites that were written with CSS before that? It's not worth the overhead in trying to change. Can I say more about Webflow? I think it's cool. I think it works. I think it works really well because you're visually writing HTML, CSS, and then there's obviously the JavaScript stuff. It's sort of a little bit more plug and play. But for the HTML, CSS side, like, it's functional because you're writing it just visually. So you're doing classes, you're adding the properties you want, and all of that. So as far as visual editors go, I think it's one of the better ones. Vladrino, what do you recommend as an intro to good website design? You mean like design? I don't know, actually. Zaid, how to find work. Got to put yourself out there is one of them. I'm not the right person to ask for that, though. I apologize. Mary doesn't. I'm having a lot of trouble with your second name. I apologize. I'm just going to say Mary. Is it? I keep switching, I think, between Mary and Marie, just because English and French. But do you have a blog? If you go to my website, just kevinpowell.co, there is a blog there. I don't write. I haven't written something in like 6 months, but yes. And as a complete beginner, yeah, 100%. Have a blog and write everything you're learning and explain what you learned, and you're going to learn so much more just by talking about it. Definitely document your learning. 100% do it. Metal guitar covers. For resets, look up, I use like a slightly modified version of Andy Bell's reset. So just look up Andy Bell modern CSS reset, and yeah. Oh, Pryor, I have to go now too. Thank you for being around for so long. I am going to be heading off. I see some questions that were coming in about Tailwind, getting started, other things like that. So I just want to say, if you're asked any of that, I've already talked about it. We've been here for a long time now. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for everybody for being here. And a really big thank you to Brent for moderating. I appreciate it. There was a few times where it looked like he had to get in there. So I appreciate you taking the time and keeping an eye on everything while I was talking away here. So thank you very much, Brent. I appreciate it. Lucien, you keep coming in with the super chats. Keep pushing me for super chat. Montreal, Canada as well. What a coincidence. Awesome. Is it Lucien then? I was saying Lucien before. Lucien, I'm guessing then, if you're in Montreal. All right, thanks everybody. I really appreciate everybody who's been here and hung out this whole time. You don't like how YouTube mods? Sorry about that. I don't know how it works, but I do appreciate that you sort of kept an eye on things. Thank you all. And yeah, if I didn't answer your question, I guarantee you I probably answered it earlier. Another thank you, Lucien, for all the super chats. It's super generous of you. I really do appreciate it. And for everyone else who super chatted along the way, thank you very much. And for just everybody for following, subscribing all this time, sharing my content, all of that. It's why I've managed to get to 200,000 subscribers. So thank you all very much. I did see a question about another AMA. I don't know. We'll see. I usually do like question and answer stuff, but like short, like little bits and pieces here and there in any of my live streams. So just come and hang out on Twitch. And yeah, that's usually where I'm live streaming. So But thanks everybody for being here. I would say thank you to everybody's and start listing out names, but there's just so many people here. But yeah, I will say, I mean, a few of you guys have been really active in the chat. So Hope and David, L. Pryor, who else did we have? If I look really fast, metal guitar covers. There was some other, there's been a few, everybody who's been in the music names, you've been chatting a lot. So thank you guys so much. Marco, appreciate it. I've been, Daniel, I've been to Vienna as well, twice now, actually. All right, I'm out. I gotta go eat something. So thank you guys so very much. You just subscribed today. Thank you, Stop Dying. And your hair color code? I don't know. My hair color's changing. It's very gray. I don't know. It's a mix of gray and brown. So bye, everybody. Take care. And I don't know how to end a stream because I'm usually in Twitch. Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna. I think I learned from being on Twitch. I don't have an ending thing set up for YouTube though. So it will just end. Usually I throw up an ending screen over on Twitch, but I don't have one, so the stream might just like stop all of a sudden. So I apologize if it's a bit of an abrupt ending. Because the break one won't make too much sense, will it? All right, thank you guys all for coming again, and I will see you again. I'm not used to YouTube, so I don't know how to end it. Oh, there it is. All right, bye everybody.